Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Connor.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio. Dennis Gradov here with Kasper Rosalowski on the 26th of June, our final episode before we go to Vegas to cover a series of crazy UFC fights. And we've got a huge record-breaking episode for you guys today.
Yeah, it's going to be an absolutely stacked show. We figured, seeing as we're going to be away for a while, and this is going to be the last episode for about a month, we're going to be overseas in the US traveling. Why not stack the deck? Why not have a big show? Now, the guests are as follows. Johnny Hendricks, the former welterweight champion, he's fighting Campbell McLaren at UFC 200 in just a couple of weeks. We figured, let's get him on the show. He's going to be the first guest. Jim Ross, a guy who MMA fans may not be quite as familiar with, but pro wrestling fans know that he's an absolute legend, a legendary commentator. He's going to be on the show talking about Brock Lesnar and a whole bunch of interesting things. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, he just got a big win. He just beat Rory McDonald. We want to get him on the show to talk about a bunch of things and what's next. Another interesting guest is Campbell McLaren, the co-creator of the UFC way back in '93. We've got him on the show. What better time? I mean, UFC 200 around the corner. We've got Campbell McLaren talking about a bunch of stuff. Chael Sonnen and the American Gangster returns to Submission Radio to, well, I mean, it doesn't really matter. You can talk to Chael about anything. It's going to be interesting. And then we've got Marc Raimondi also joining us for a bit of a breakdown, a bit of a roundtable discussion. And then there's more, isn't there, Dennis?
Yeah, there's more, Cass. I mean, we've been getting a lot of great fan questions to info@submissionradio.com, and we've chosen some great ones to go through. We'll be doing that after Marc at the end of the show, so make sure to stick around. And we'll also give you a couple of our thoughts about the Brock Lesnar-Mark Hunt fight, because how could we not? This is our last opportunity before we go over to America and start covering this thing. So a big packed show. A lot of great things happening today.
Yeah, we're going to sound like a broken record here, but seriously, there is no better time to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already subscribed. I know some people are listening on, actually a lot of people are listening on iTunes and Stitcher and TuneIn and SoundCloud, but make sure you subscribed on YouTube because we'll be having a gigantic amount of content on the YouTube channel with not only UFC 200 but UFC Fight Night Alvarez Dos Anjos, and of course the tough finale Jędrzejczyk against Claudia Gadelha, and I mean just everything else, the Hall of Fame ceremony. There's going to be scrums, workouts, weigh-ins, all that kind of stuff, pre-fight, post-fight, press conferences. The Conor McGregor Nate Diaz press conference will be there. That's going to be up on the channel. There's going to be highlights. We're going to be doing vlogs as well, aren't we, Dennis? Are you excited about these vlogs?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been waiting for us to do vlogs for a really long time, and we're like, this is it. We've been meaning to do this for a while, but what better time to debut it than our first trip down to Vegas. So you guys will not only get to see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff of what we're getting up to, but also see us do some fun activities and sort of discover Vegas for the first time. So if you're an Aussie, New Zealander, or even somewhere in America, but you can't make it down to the event, we'll definitely let you guys know exactly what it's like. Very excited. We won't be releasing one a day because that's a bit tough for us, but we're aiming to do like a highlight episode every few days. So stay tuned to the channel because there's going to be some crazy stuff. We're really excited for this one.
Yeah, you guys will essentially be there with us. Of course, don't forget to follow us on Twitter @SubmissionAUS. The Facebook is facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAUS. If you're feeling frisky, if you're feeling generous, don't be afraid to go on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review. They've been pouring in, and we really appreciate it. We read those, and it means a lot, guys, to us. But there is a lot to talk about, a lot to discuss, and it's a stacked and packed show. So without further ado, we're cutting to our first guest. You know the order. And Dennis, I believe you're ready to introduce him.
Our next guest is a former UFC welterweight champion and now takes on Kelvin Gastelum at one of the biggest cards of all time, UFC 200. Johnny Hendricks, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Hey, thank you for having me. How y'all doing today?
Doing very well. Very excited to have you. Now, Johnny, we've taken a bit of a look through your Twitter, and we noticed you've been doing a bit of fishing with the kids. Give us the lowdown. How did you go, and what were some of the big catches?
I just try to get the girls outdoors as much as possible, so they're not, for one, they understand what outdoors can bring them, and two, they're just not sitting at home being on iPads or the computer all day long. So whenever I take the girls, I usually do sand bass fishing. We just troll around until we find them. We'll throw in a couple of lines, and whenever we snag them or whenever they bite it, we'll set the hook, and then we'll let our girls reel them in. You know, and also it's also fun for them because you're like, real, and they can do that, you know, and it keeps them entertained.
Oh, do you remember the first time you went fishing with your dad, Johnny? Does it still stand out in your head?
Yeah, it does. It does. You know, I was not a good bass fisherman. We used to go catfishing with limb lines and trot lines.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And we would check them every 2 hours. You know, it's more of a just get together and have fun type atmosphere, you know, where we'd go out on a river, we'd camp out in the middle of nowhere and spend the weekend together. You know, that was sort of our fishing trip. And that's sort of what I want to do with my girls as well, is just get them outdoors. You know, like I said, I love the outdoors and I want them to as well. So that way, whenever they get older, they can live off the land sort of like the way I do.
Yeah.
Or if there's an apocalypse, they can provide for themselves.
Yeah.
Now, Johnny, this time going around into your UFC 200 fight, the MMA community, you know, hasn't really heard as much from you. Tell us, how did you cope with the loss of Stephen Thompson?
You know, it was one of those things that, yeah, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to say much, and I didn't want to get out there, and sort of what we were thinking and sort of where my head was at is that, you know, our main focus, Stephen Thompson's a good fighter, and I think he proved that this weekend. But for us, it was always the weight. You know, I missed weight with Woodley, and so I put forth the weight cut more than Stephen Thompson.
Mm-mm.
And that was a bad mistake on my part. And second is that whenever we sparred, you know, everything's a learning curve for me, and I try to constantly evolve myself. And I didn't for that fight. And one thing we didn't do, that every fight that he has fought, he's always came forward. He's always moved forward. He's always like an aggressor. You know, and so we were sort of planning on him doing a little bit of movement, not a whole lot like he did. And so whenever I did my sparring sessions, they would do some movement, but as soon as I would do my movements, I would trap them and I would throw my hands. And that's sort of what I did the first minute. Okay, I know it wasn't a very long fight. I think it was like a minute and 40 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first minute, I did exactly what I was supposed to be doing. Well, all of a sudden, he went to game plan B. Maybe he thought he could do game plan A. If that didn't work, he went to game plan B. Well, I didn't work so much on the game plan B of him trying to run away. You know, throw the kick to run, in a sense. And that's sort of what he did. He threw the kick to run, and whenever he did that to me, I lost my cool. You know, it doesn't happen very often, but I did, and that's whenever I took the center of the octagon, I was like, fight me. You know, we're here to fight. We're not here to run around. We're here to fight. And as soon as you think that, it's all downhill. And he capitalized on it, and he finished me. All right. So sort of what I'm doing now is sitting here going, all right, this fight, I'm planning both ways. You know, Gastelum might, you know, every fight I've seen, he moves forward. But guess what? What if he learns from that fight? Mm-hmm. What if he's sitting here saying, hey, you know, I can actually, what if I throw a couple and get him to chase me, and then he'll get flustered, and then he'll take the center of Osgon, and it'll be easier for me. Well, we're working both game plans.
Mm-mm. Before we talk about that fight, I'm just wondering, you know, a lot of people aren't happy with Tyron Woodley getting the next title shot. Do you think that after he beat you, Wonderboy should have gotten the shot instead?
You know what? Above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Above my pay grade. You know, hey, I'm not here to predict fights or set up fights. That's Joe Silva and Dana White's job. You know, my job is here to fight and prepare my best for each fight I can. and that's sort of, I got away from that, and that's another thing that I have done, is that this fight, nothing else matters except for Gastelum, and Gastelum for July 9th. That's it. I've always answered other questions, and I've always said, this is who I'd like to fight next, da-da-da-da. I'm sort of getting away from that. I learned a lot from this last fight, or in return, what I've done is set myself back and told myself what got me to where I was, what got me the success that I was able to get. One, the good Lord blessed me with a lot of things. Two, have your mindset right. And what I mean by that is saying no one else matters, nobody else matters, except for the person who's standing in my way today. And who is that person standing in my way today? That is Kevin Gastelum, or Kelvin.
Yeah, for sure. Don't forget the beard. I think the beard is a big attribute to a lot of your success. Now, a lot of people pointed to the fact that you left your longtime camp in Team Takedown, and that was for your last fight. Now, looking back at it, did the fact that you had to organize your own coaches and run everything yourself, did that have an effect on your performance? And I'm wondering, will you still be organizing your own training camp this time around, Johnny?
Yeah, I'm still organizing it, but there, like I said, for example, it was hard to find sparring partners last fight camp. One, somebody who can throw kicks like he does, right? Mm-hmm. Second is that finding places and people who would spar me. For some reason, they think I'm going to hurt them, and I don't. I'm not going to. So, and that's something that a lot of people are starting to figure out, is that I'm not going to hurt them sparring. I'm not going to try to be pardon my French, but a douchebag in the gym. Mm-hmm. I want training partners, and I want people that can, that want to train. And so I only got to spar 3 or 4 times for my last fight. This fight, I don't know how many, I'm sparring twice a week. So that's the thing that's changed, being able to get people like that. So it just helps my timing and helps me understand what I need to do and what I need to work on.
Okay, well, that's an interesting fact. So at this moment, you have the training partners and the team that you need going into this fight, is what you're saying?
Yes, sir. I got everything. Everything is sort of set the way that I need it to be. And so, like I said, everything's running smoothly at this point of my camp.
Well, let's look ahead. Obviously, UFC 200, you mentioned July 9th is the date. You're on one of the most stacked cards of all time, if not the most stacked card of all time. What are your thoughts on being on such an important card? What does that mean to you?
It means everything. It means, I'm very lucky to be on a card that has, there's 20 fighters that had the opportunity. And if you look at the 10 that are on the main card, they're huge names, and 3 of them are title fights. I'm sort of, there's a part of me that's sort of excited to be on the card, because now I get to sit back and actually enjoy the main card. Whenever I'm a huge Kane supporter. I like Misha. I like Frankie. I like DC and John Jones. The only one that I don't have sort of a foot in is the Brock Lesnar and Marc card.
Yeah. Well, that's a crazy one there. Since you brought it up, we have to get your prediction. Who do you think wins that one?
You know what? That
Is it above your pay grade? It can't be. Don't tell us that it's above your pay grade, John.
Yeah.
We want a prediction.
Yeah. No. Okay, so I think that's 50-50 one.
Yeah.
50%. So because the reason why is we know what Marc Hunt can do. He's a heavy-handed hitter, right? But he sucks at the takedown defense. All right? And what do we know? Brock hates getting hit in the face. We've seen it time and time again. He gets hit in the face, and he will literally run to the other side of the octagon to get away from getting hit in the face. We've seen it, and we've seen it multiple times. So, but we also know that Brock Lesnar will do anything he can to get him on the ground. Because if he can get Marc on the ground, he will finish him. So, if if Mark Hunt can come out there and hit him a couple of times in the face, I have Mark Hunt winning. But if Brock Lesnar sort of does what he did with the Crazy Horse back when he first came in, he throws that right hand, gets him off balance, and takes him down really quick, then you got to give it all to Brock Lesnar.
Well, I mean, it's like you mentioned, it's a stack card. It's absolutely star-studded. Looking at your fight, I mean, Kelvin Gastelum, you know, he's a strong wrestler. He likes to mix up his strike. What do you see as his weakness going into this fight? What do you think you can capitalize on?
One is that he likes to move forward. That's something that I can definitely use against him. You know, and the way that he throws punches, I'm not going to get into too much of the details because some of it is my game plan. But the way that he does certain things, I have figured out. I've watched the footage. And I think I figured out how to use that against him. And I really, really hope that he is right that way. But I've also prepared for a guy that knows that I can hit hard, and that he knows he sparred me before and it didn't go well. So what I'm thinking is that he might do a little bit of both, where he's going to try to come out and see if he can set up himself to be a forward fighter and come forward. And once I do what I'm supposed to do, and once I do all that, and he will turn into a guy that might try to throw a couple punches and run.
Well, he's obviously known for his wrestling, and you're known for your wrestling. Do you think this is a fight where the wrestling sort of cancels itself out, or do you believe your wrestling is stronger than Kelvin's?
Yeah, I think my wrestling is stronger than Kelvin. I do believe that it is. Again, when we used to spar, I was able to take you down, do what I needed to do back in the day, but that was also a year and a half ago, so I can't count too much on that, if that makes sense. So what I have to do is I have to sit there and say, all right, how am I going to, with my hands and the way that my kickboxing and everything has developed in the last 2 years, I think it's going to help, and it's going to make everything set, if I time everything right, and that's what I'm working on. If everything goes right, it'll set up my takedowns, or if I don't want to, my punches that much better.
Well, speaking of setting things up, I mean, you're the former welterweight champion, Johny. Gastelum's ranked number 12. You're still at number 5. What do you think a win over Gastelum will do for you in terms of this division and your title campaign?
You know what? Title campaign, I'm not even worried about that. I'm worried about just getting a win. I don't care about a title. Like I said, I'm overlooking. I'm done looking at all that kind of stuff. What I want to do now, I really want to make sure that I stay focused at one task. I hate to sound like a broken record, but that one task is the most important, because, like I said, if I start focusing on a title again, well, guess what? It could end up like the Steven or the Wonderboy Thompson fight. Mm-hmm. You get beat. Well, guess what? Now you got 2 losses back to back. What do you do then? So that's why I'm really focusing on one thing and one thing only right now, and that is Gastelum, and see where that's going to lead me next. Like I said, to campaign for a title fight, if I do that, then there have been people that can jump. Look at Carlos Condit. He jumped me, and after he beat the number 12th ranked dude, it is possible. But as of right now, in my mind, it's only Gastelum.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a very interesting matchup. Now, we're going to let you go very soon, Johny. Just a few more questions. First things first, obviously new weight regulations coming in. I'm just wondering, obviously you were in great shape for your last fight, but is a part of you a little bit worried because there's new regulations that say that, you have to check in at no more than 8% of your target weight at the beginning of fight week. How hard will that be in terms of your cut and making weight? Will it have any effect on you?
No, because Wednesday I hit 89.
Oh, wow.
So I just have to lose 5 pounds technically to lose 5 pounds by Tuesday. In 2 weeks or 12 days, I got to lose 5 pounds to be under that target weight. I think it's 184 for my weight class. For 170, you can hit 184. But we want to come in. Last fight, I came in at 176.7 or 8. This fight camp, I want to come in at 181. No, 182. That's pushing it though. I'd like to be at 181 because we easily lost 10 pounds the week of last fight. And so I'm actually doing better than I was last camp on my weight. So if that all stays true, I'll be able to put more water in me in the next week or so to keep my body weight where I want it. So whenever I go into the fight week, I'll be drinking a little bit more water, which will be easier to lose that weight.
Excellent. Well, that's good news all around. Johnny, we'll let you go in just a moment. I mean, something we have to ask you about. The other big news is George St-Pierre saying that he's ready to return to the octagon. I know that Kelvin Gastelum is your one and only focus at UFC 200. I'm just wondering, this is a rematch that you've wanted for a while. Did it pique your interest? Did it get you excited in any way hearing this news?
No, because I've been hearing it for the last 2.5 years. It's like every 6 to 8 months he said he's wanting to come back. After this fight, I'll look more into it. But until that, until he's actually, the UFC says that he is coming out, it doesn't pique my interest because, like I said, it would. I told people that, if I had to move to 185 just to fight him, I would do that. But right now, I got 2 weeks left. 2 weeks to focus on Gastelum, and in 2 weeks, there's not going to be that much difference if he does come back or doesn't. But if he does come back in 2 weeks, it'll be perfect timing for me.
Well, there you guys go. Now, before we let you go, Johnny, what's the prediction? How do you see yourself beating Kelvin Gastelum at UFC 200?
I just plan on, I plan on beating him down for 3 rounds. That's my main goal. Don't get me wrong. I'll be looking for the finish. I want to finish, but I'm not going to go out there and say I'm going to finish him. I want to go out there. I want to make sure that I show that I'm the more dominant fighter. I'm the better skilled fighter. And at any given moment, if the knockout's there or the submission's there, I will be going for it.
Well, there you go, guys. A brand new Johnny Hendricks, reinvented in many ways, and ultra focus on Kelvin Gastelum. That goes down on July 9th at UFC 200. Of course, the time difference will make it July 10th here in Australia. Johnny, we can't wait, guys. Don't forget to follow him on Twitter at Johnny Hendricks. Best of luck in your fight, and thank you so much for chatting with us, Johnny.
Hey, thank you, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my 2 favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
All right, guys. Joining us here on Submission Radio is a WWE NWA Hall of Famer who is an iconic figure in pro wrestling. He now hosts a hugely successful podcast via Podcast One called The Ross Report, as well as his one-man show touring around the world. Jim Ross, welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
Everything's good. Good to talk to you guys again. Hope you're well.
Well, we're very well now that you're on the program. It's been a big 2016 for you, but we saw some recent updates where you've had a meeting with some Australian representatives about bringing your barbecue sauce and products to our shelves. Jim, is this true, and when can we expect it at our shores?
Well, it is definitely true. We've had very productive meetings last week in Los Angeles with a Australian contingent of entrepreneurs and businessmen, and that went well. I think that we're probably one more productive meeting away from being able to announce something positive, but right now it looks good. So fingers crossed, and we'll keep you updated.
Good, because I've been doing a lot of barbecuing, Jim, and my meat is lacking something. So I'm hoping that your sauce can provide that extra something. Now, of course, when it comes to pro wrestling, there was a huge splash made in the MMA world when Brock Lesnar announced his return to UFC 200 some weeks ago. What surprised fans even more was that the WWE could come to a deal with the UFC to let him do the fight. From being around Vince for so many years, were you surprised he agreed to a deal like this?
Well, not really. Brock is a part-time performer for WWE, certainly a phenomenal performer, and certainly one could also say he or John Cena are 1 and 1A as far as the top guys in the company. But I think that Vince certainly wants to keep his talent happy. The happier you keep your guys, the more productive they will be. Brock had an opportunity to earn a remarkable payday for UFC 200, and I'm hearing all kinds of numbers. I have no idea conclusive what the number is, but I'm thinking it's certainly north of $3 million, which is, and maybe more than that, which is a pretty good, as they say, day's work. So I think Vince probably wanted to keep Brock happy, but I certainly think that somewhere down the road, Vince's generosity will be repaid by the UFC in the form of something that is good for WWE. Could be, we must talked about Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania 33. Something like that could certainly be in the card. So I think the way I looked at it, and I wrote about it on my website, it's a win-win. I think everybody wins. Lesnar gets a great payday. UFC gets an attraction that's going to help drive pay-per-view buys without question. And WWE makes the talent happy. I'm sure got some compensation for it directly, and then some sort of indirect payoff at a time to be determined is probably in the works as well.
It's an interesting situation. I know you talked about it being a win-win, but if Lesnar goes in there and gets knocked out by Marc Hunt in brutal fashion in the first round, does that hurt his credibility in the WWE when he returns? Because in a lot of ways, he's the biggest monster the company has.
No, I don't think so. I can certainly see why that question would be asked, and it's a good question. I think that people are now, with all the information on social media, heck, I got almost 1.5 million Twitter followers. What the hell's that about? You know what I mean? It's like, there's all kinds of information out there. I think people could differentiate a real sport UFC athletic event from a structured theatrical-based presentation in sports entertainment. I don't think it would hurt him at all, quite frankly.
Now, we've been asking everybody this, and I want to get your opinion. Do you expect this being a one-time thing? Or, if Lesnar wants to do so, do you think he could potentially have a couple more fights in the future?
I would say more fights in the future would be, I'm guessing, strictly guessing, less than 50-50. I would approach this as it's more than likely the last time I'm going to see Brock Lesnar in the octagon. But as sure as I say that, he goes out there and has a stellar performance against a heavy-handed Marc Hunt and gets his hand raised. He may get the itch to do another one somewhere down the road. And again, if the money's right, obviously UFC's paying WWE something for the use of Brock Lesnar services. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a unique deal because it's never happened before. But I think it's a win-win for everybody in that regard. So it's hard to say he'll have another fight. I lean that he will not, but I think a lot of it is what you alluded to, the outcome of this fight. I am going to the fight. I'll be in Las Vegas. I'm of the belief, fellas, that I don't think the fight will get out of the first round. I don't know who's going to go to sleep first in the octagon before they go to sleep in their hotel room later in the night, but somebody's getting knocked out, and I think it'll be inside 5 minutes.
Let me ask you something, Jim, because there's been a lot of contention about how long Brock's actually known about this fight. Obviously, 4 weeks of training isn't enough for him to come back into an octagon against a guy like Marc Hunt. How long do you think he's been getting ready for this return to the UFC? And how long do you think he's sort of known in the back of his head that he'll be doing something at UFC 200?
He's a very pragmatic guy. He's like old, blue-collar, and kind of a nuts and bolts guy, not a fancy guy. He's fashions himself as a farmer, a rancher, outdoorsman, and it's all true. It's not an act. So I would tell you that he knows that anything less than probably an 8-week camp is not going to be acceptable for his own standards. The last thing he wants to do is to make his return in this much ballyhooed matchup of two knockout guys and lay an egg. That I don't think he wants to soil the sheets on that deal. So he's just a competitive guy. So I'm telling you that I would guess by the time the fight rolls around, he will have at least 8 good weeks of training under his belt.
It's interesting because a healthy Brock Lesnar, it's a dangerous thing. Do you think there's a chance we'll see the best version of Brock Lesnar so far? on July 9th because he's been looking great in the WWE, very, very healthy. And obviously, he had the issues with diverticulitis near the end of his career. And at the start of his career, he was fairly inexperienced.
Yes, I think that we will see a healthy Brock Lesnar, and he was not healthy, as you mentioned, his last handful of fights because of the diverticulitis. Being one that has experienced diverticulitis, culminating with having 13 inches of my large intestine removed and my intestines reconnected, it's not a real fun process. I don't know that he had that extreme, surgery. But in any event, he'll be healthy, and I think that'll be a lot of difference. The bacteria and the poison, the infection will be out of his body. He'll be able to get strong again. It'll affect his stamina. I'm a whole lot more worried about his striking defense than I am his readiness to fight or his physical conditioning. I think his conditioning will be good, but I can't see that he or Hunt are going to prepare for a long fight. I think they both know that it's going to end violently and suddenly earlier than maybe some want to discuss. But, Lesnar will be ready to go. He'll be ready to go, and he'll be healthy, and that's the main thing. So it should be fun. Like I said, I'm more worried about stand-up defense than I am his conditioning.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, the interesting thing is obviously he's got SummerSlam coming up, which is a huge, 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 huge show. Is the WWE taking a bit of a risk? Because Mark Hunt, he's a serious hitter. I mean, we all saw what he did to Stephen Struve's jaw. He just broke that thing in half. Are they worried at all about the fact that maybe Hunt can hurt Lesnar so badly that he wouldn't be able to return in time to do SummerSlam?
I can't speak for WWE, of course, but I can tell you that in all likelihood, if Brock wanted this fight that he approached them with, they're all for it. Obviously, this stylistically is one of the less advantageous matchups that Lesnar could have gotten to return. If your weakness, and I think his weakness has always been, or at least has exposed the last few fights, and again, the weakness of the diverticulitis, his conditioning and all that stuff was a contributing factor, but it was obvious that he has problems with striking defense. A lot of amateur wrestlers do, and hopefully some of that will be eased in this camp. I hope, it's got to be, because the one thing that Lesnar has a weakness at is the one thing that Mark Hunt is really, really good at. So, it's going to be a compelling fight, and I don't think WWE had anything to do with the matchup. I think the deal was done, a business deal was done, in my opinion. That's all. They had nothing to do with the matchmaking. That was Dana White and the Fertitta brothers getting that deal put together, and they're matchmakers. They knew what they wanted. I'll tell you this. I've got a lot of friends that they might have got together and watched UFC 200, but now that Lesnar's on the card and the train wreck potential of that whole scenario, it seems to be a lot more interest. I think that his inclusion on the card is going to stimulate pay-per-view buys immensely globally.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's something that even, MMA fans would agree. Even MMA fans are excited about this, even though Lesnar spent, the better part of 4.5 years in the WWE. I wanted to get your thoughts on something. Obviously, Fedor Emelianenko had a less than impressive fight last weekend, but do you still want to see him versus Lesnar in the UFC? Or after his latest fight, have you sort of lost interest, Jim?
I have not lost interest, and I don't think the general public has lost interest. Fedor can be easily resurrected. The library on him is unbelievable. It's easy to get him reestablished. He's not moving from Russia, so even though it sounds so blasé and passé, the North American, the United States versus Russia storyline still plays. Is it kind of getting dated? Probably, but I can tell you this: when the United States was playing Canada in the last Winter Olympics in hockey, and of course America is not a amateur hockey state or country. The broadcast was on fire. The nationalistic thing. So the point I'm making. So the USA versus Russia concept, in parentheses, is still sellable, and everybody knows it's not going to be a pretty fight. You're going to see somebody get their ass whipped. It's just going to be who could get the biggest punch into somebody's face or a liver shot or something debilitating. So you know that you're going to have a train wreck if you have Fedor and Brock, because it can't be pretty. It can't be. So I think people, if it's on a good card, it gets a rating. It sells either pay-per-views or gets a massive television rating.
Yeah, certainly. And if you had to pick that fight now, I mean, obviously that fight was supposed to happen in 2009, but now with so many years after that, is Fedor still the favorite in your opinion? Do you think Brock can beat him now that it's sort of a bit down the road for Fedor?
Fedor's last fight was not overly impressive, but it was on. It wasn't on. It wasn't on broadcast television. I don't know how many people actually saw it, and so. But I saw clips of it, and he didn't have a great night. Obviously, I don't know all that behind the story, the backstory is. I have no idea. I was until I see Brock fight again, you kind of got to go with the guy that's still in the game. So Fedor is still in MMA. Lesnar has not been for, as you mentioned, several years. So I would think Fedor would still be a slight favorite based on the fact that he's still an active MMA practitioner.
We're going to ask you, on the other side of the spectrum, CM Punk, he's really struggled to make his UFC debut, but the word is UFC 203 is finally the date. It's locked in. He's going to be fighting Mickey Gall. What do you make of this, Jim? It's taken him a long time to finally get here, and we've had a fight penciled in the past. Do you think he makes it to 203, and what are you expecting from Punk when he makes his MMA debut?
I think one of the great things about UFC signing CM Punk is that they have no expectations as to what to expect. I don't know how any fan can have any bona fide or legitimate expectations because we just don't know. It's totally foreign. It's a whole new world, new pitch. It's a new game for CM Punk. I know he's very cerebral. I know he's a big fan of the genre. He's worked hard. He's a very, very smart guy, driven, if you will. He doesn't even know how he's going to do. So I think that the unknown is what's going to sell that fight. Don't doubt for a minute that the UFC or the WWE fans are going to want to buy a UFC event because it's just we're too curious. We have no idea what's going to happen. Is Punk going to get knocked out in the first minute? Is he going to get bloodied up and beat half to death because we know that he won't quit readily? Or is he going to come in and shock the world and be a world beater and a kick-ass MMA guy? I don't know. All I know is that he'll be mentally and physically ready. I will certainly buy the fight because I'm as curious as the next fan. What the heck's going to happen?
I mean, one of the things we've been sort of debating with people and talking about is the fact that now that there's a bridge built between the WWE and the UFC with this Lesnar thing, do you think there's a chance we may see him return to the WWE at some point next year because of the relationship between the UFC and the WWE and it's there now?
Absolutely not. I don't think one thing has to do anything with the other. He's his own guy. I think this deal with this newfound relationship that we're all talking about is a very one-dimensional one. It has to do with Brock Lesnar and Brock Lesnar alone, in my view. And it's a simple deal. Yeah, you'll get him for July the 9th, and then we'll get blank for WrestleMania 33 or something, and cash, or whatever. But no, I don't think so. I don't. CM Punk is, I would think, if I was booking any company, he'd be a guy you definitely want for a lot of reasons. But I just don't know how the feelings are left. I wasn't there in the front line like I was at one point. I don't really know how it's all left. I've read things. I know about pending lawsuits and all this other crap. So I don't really know, but I just don't see Punk making a return to WWE anytime soon. There are other companies that he can work in. I can see him having a great run in New Japan for a lot of money, draw a lot of money, make a lot of money, and enjoy the heck out of the process, for example. But, he may not even want to get back into wrestling. We don't know that. We're assuming that he will. I don't think he needs the money. I think he's just smart with his money, unlike a lot of his peers. So, I think his wrestling career could very well, on a WWE level, be history. With somebody else, you never know. And look, again, one nice meeting with WWE could probably address a lot of issues as well. So it's just one of those deals you can't predict. It'd be great if he went back and had a great run and could end up on fire with a WrestleMania main event and all that stuff. It'd be a great story to write. but I just don't know that it's going to happen.
Jim, we really appreciate the time you're giving us. As we let you go, we're excited to see your barbecue sauce and products down here in Australia, but are there any plans for you to come down and, do your show here for the fans sometime?
Well, I do my podcast every week called The Ross Report, and it's on Podcast One and iTunes. It's a free podcast, and I talk about that from time to time because I get questions from the Twitter folks asking me. I have never been to Australia in all the years I've been on TV there, decades. I've been on television there since the WCW days. So I would love to come down there. We need to find a good, strong promoter that's used to bringing acts to Australia, and find some, 300 to 500 seat venues or small theaters or whatever that we can play. I'd love to bring my show down there. It's an easy show to produce. It's a fun show. It's it's basically Q&As, but I do a little, stand-up type material. Sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's not. Depends how much I've had to drink. Sometimes you get overserved in these damn places, So, but I'd love to, and I hope that folks will keep that in mind. I'll certainly let you guys know if we get something working, and or somebody or somebody's listening, and they're an entertainment promoter. Tour guy, a concert promoter, there's ways to get hooked up and see what we can work out. So the door is open to do that. I just hope that we can get it worked out. And I keep saying it's going to be this year. And it looks right now it's going to be 17, but that might work too because my book will be out by then, and so that might tie in well as well. So, or I might be down there before that if we get our sauces and stuff on the grocery store shelves, which again looks very favorable.
Well, there you guys go. And obviously the show is fantastic. We've had a really good review on it every time you go around the world and do it. And any promoters listening to this right now, make sure to reach out to Jim because it would be a huge event here for the fans. Now, Jim, you mentioned Twitter. So as we let you go, one last question. The Twitter followers have been asking us to ask you this. Roman Reigns, he's suspended from the WWE, obviously lost his title. What was your reaction to this whole situation? And how much do you think this hurt the WWE with him having to sort of exit the picture just as he was starting to gain a little bit of steam with the fans?
Well, it's embarrassing for the talent. I have no idea what he was, what a substance that you want to hope inadvertently was taking. There's a lot of the wrestlers, men and women, are really big into the supplements out of the health food stores, and if they're not careful and they don't really vet it and see what's on those ingredients, they could be inadvertently taking something that's against the wellness program. So I'm assuming that's what he did. He's a hell of a good kid. I had a lot of fun when he was in developmental when I was still working in WWE, helping him and talking with him, kind of mentoring him a little bit, like a lot of guys did, because he was so you wanted to mentor him because he listened and he put what you told him into practice. So I'm disappointed in him. And he's got to pay more attention if that's what the case was, and hopefully he'll learn a great lesson now this 30 days he's setting, and hopefully he won't be setting, he'll be getting better. And I sent out a tweet at JRSBBQ recently that said, the game's not over. It was an inadvertent timeout, so now you got to come back better than you left, and make up for lost time. So I don't know that it hurt WWE. You have to rearrange creative. I'm sure that he'll come back. I would put him back in the triple threat match at Payback. You don't want to discount the other guys' efforts creatively and what they built to get to this triple threat match. It costs the other two guys more or as much as it costs Reigns if you don't have him in the match. And so I don't know who wins in that equation. The fans don't win. So I think the triple threat match should be booked and held. So, but he's got to be smarter on what he takes. The company has invested lots of money. The talents have invested a lot of their time and efforts into helping him, and he's got to just be smarter than he was. And like I said, I just want to believe that it was totally inadvertent and that it will not happen again is my hope for him, because he's a good kid, and he can be a real strong force in that locker room for years to come, but he's got to make better decisions.
Well, there you go, guys. You heard it from the legend himself. Make sure to follow JR on Twitter at JRSBBQ. His weekly podcast, The Ross Report, on Podcast One. And make sure to look out for JR's barbecue sauce and products, hopefully making their way down to Australia very soon. And hopefully, Jim, if not 2016, then at least 2017 is the year that we finally see Jim Ross come down to Australia. And for more information, you guys can go to www.jrsbarbq.com. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate chatting to you, Jim.
Okay, fellas, have a great day. I appreciate you, and good day.
What's up, guys? This is Uriah Faber, the California Kid, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, and next guest is coming off arguably the biggest win of his career, where he defeated Rory McDonald at UFC Ottawa to officially become the #1 ranked UFC welterweight. With a lot of momentum on his side, welcome back Stephen Wonderboy Thompson to the program. Stephen, congratulations, man. How's it going, and are you still riding the high of victory?
Oh, definitely. I feel great going out, going 5 rounds with Rory McDonald. My body feels great. Got little bumps and bruises, man, but super excited.
It's interesting because a lot of people obviously, know you as one of the nicest guys in MMA. You're coming up for this huge win, and I text you to organize this interview, and you tell me that you're teaching a class so soon after your fight. A lot of people would go off on a holiday, but you're back in the gym.
Yeah, we got back Sunday evening, and I was back in the gym Monday morning teaching classes, my friend. It's just something that I love to do. It's my first love.
I love it. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson giving back. Now, after a little over 4 years, you finally climbed the ranks and beaten some of the best fighters at 170. How does it feel to finally and officially be the #1 ranked UFC welterweight?
Wow, man, it's so surreal, to be honest with you. I remember the first day, I found out that I would be fighting for the UFC. I never knew that I would be the #1 contender right now. I've always made it a goal. I've always knew that, I was going to go out there and give it my all and go for it. But, man, dude, I'm the #1 contender. And hopefully I'll be the champion here pretty soon. So, you know what, man, you work hard, you stay focused on things that you want to accomplish, and, man, you'll get there.
I know a lot of people, including ourselves, thought you could have gone on to fight for the belt after you beat Johny Hendricks, and after you said yourself you were a little bit disappointed that you got Rory instead. But is there a satisfaction in knowing that you get the next title shot and you truly earned it? You're not ranked 5th or 6th or 3rd and getting a shot, but rather you've taken the long way and beaten everybody put before you. Is there a bit of satisfaction in that?
There is. I expected to get the title shot after I fought Johny Hendricks and beat Johny Hendricks. But, like I was saying before, sometimes you got to prove to the fans in the UFC that you may have to fight one more time just to prove that, you deserved it. And, go out there and fight a guy as honorable and just an athlete as Rory McDonald, man, it definitely makes it all that much better.
Yeah, we've seen many guys in the past build impressive streaks only to have it undone by a loss. Was there extra pressure for you going into this fight that if things didn't go your way and you lost, even though you'd made it so close, you'd have to climb the ladder all over again?
Yeah, man, now that I look back at it, there could have been, a whole lot of pressure on me. But you know what? I like to go in thinking that, it's just another fight. And that's just for my psyche, helps me keep calm and doesn't affect me. Some people it does affect the pressure if you think about it like that. So I try not to think about it like that. I think about it as it's just another fight. I got to go out there and have fun and do my thing. And, it just pays off, man. It helps me keep calm, helps me stay focused out there when I'm in the octagon. I don't feel like I have to win it. And that's how I go into fights thinking.
Now, did the fight play out the way you thought it would in your head? And what did you find to be the biggest challenge for you to overcome against Rory?
It didn't really go the way I expected it to. Before the fight, I was telling myself I'm going to go out there and I want to give it 110% and just take it to Rory right off the bat, kind of like I did Johny Hendricks. But as soon as I stepped out there, and he lowered his stance, he ended up sticking his left arm out there. I knew that he was ready for me to close that gap so he can look for the takedown. So I had to, as soon as I got out there, I had to change my game plan. And, the one thing that I really was very difficult for me to get around was that front arm. He would like to reach it out, keep it out there, which made me have to use my sidekick a lot, and I had to find ways around that arm. Not just his left arm, but his right arm. If you go back and watch, he kept his right arm directly in front of his face. Obviously, he was protecting his nose, but all my straight shots hit his arm instead of his head. So it was kind of difficult to actually land that one shot. So it made me had to change it up a little bit, start throwing some uppercuts in there, and just kind of mix it up.
Well, we broke down the fight with the one and only Robin Black, who really enjoyed the fight and the technical chess match there was. There was, however, a mixed reaction amongst fans, even some boos during the fight. Just wondering, Stephen, did that reaction bother you at all, that maybe some people didn't grasp how difficult a challenge Rory was?
You know what? Not really. I always like to stay positive. I've always been a positive guy. But, yeah, man, I remember actually going out there in the middle of the round, I'm hearing these guys boo, and it really wanted to make me go out there and just throw. But I knew the type of caliber of fighter I was facing. And if I went out there doing that, he would take advantage of it and try and, possibly get me down to the ground where he feels more comfortable. So I had to, ignore it and just do what I do, man. And you know what? A fight after, I don't know if you saw the co-main event, the Cowboy Cerrone. That was a great fight.
Oh, yeah.
Good knockout. And the fight before that won, fight of the night. So the two fights before us were just nonstop action, standing in front of each other and just duking it out. And I couldn't go. That's something I couldn't do and go out there and do against Rory McDonald because, he's just that good of a fighter. So I had to really be cautious out there. But there's a lot of martial artists out there who really liked the fight, thought it was a very good technical fight, good, smart fight, and just keeping them on the outside and trying to pick them apart. But that puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, and we definitely enjoyed it here. I'm wondering, how tough was it mentally to have to stay sharp and alert for 25 full minutes against a guy who's always dangerous and can catch you at any moment? Was that one of the most grueling aspects of the fight?
Oh, man, tell me about it. It wasn't really physical. It was mental, just like you said, because you had to go out there every round, every second, and just it was a chess match. Like I was saying, you had to think every step of the way. You really didn't know exactly what he was going to throw. First round, he went out there and hit that crazy, I forgot what you call it, but try and go for that rolling heel hook. And that threw me off right off the bat. I was like, man, I got to keep this guy away. I think he expected to go out there, hit me with that the first time and submit me and it'd be over. Go out there and make a statement that way because he tried it two more times after that. But, man, it's grueling, man. And I'm still tired from it, not physically, but mentally, man, because you have to go out there and you have to stay sharp for 25 minutes. And, man, it was difficult.
I mean, it was an incredible fight, a chess match, very, very interesting. But would you say, now that it's all said and done, this fight with Rory was the most difficult of your career?
I think so. My MMA career, definitely. I mean, he was the number one guy contender and been at the top of the game for a long time for a reason. He's very well-rounded, the best well-rounded fighter that I've ever faced. And man, yeah, I mean, but just to go out there and be able to keep the fight standing against a good wrestler and a good jiu-jitsu guy, it says something about my wrestling. And I think everybody in the division has to, not really be afraid of it, but be aware of it, that I can keep a fight standing against the best wrestlers out there.
You guys are obviously friends. It looked like you guys had a brief moment afterwards in the octagon. What did you guys say to each other?
You know what? I went up to him. I gave him a big hug. Man, I told him, I said, I love you, man. And because I've known Roy for a very long time, and it does suck having to go out there and be punched in the head and punch your friend in the head for 25 minutes. I think I ended up breaking his nose again. So, that's something you just hate doing it. But we understand his business, and I know he would do the same thing for me if he had the shot. And like I said before, I don't think it's very respectful for me not to go out there and give it 100% for him. I know his goals and he knows my goals, but if he's going to fight me, he's going to fight the best Stephen Thompson and vice versa. If I'm going to fight Rory, I want it to be the best Rory McDonald.
I'm just wondering, because you guys are close and obviously there was that nice interaction after the fight. What happened backstage? Did you guys hang out or speak anymore afterwards?
Oh, we definitely did, man. We walked back and we pretty much hung out the rest of the night. You know, going to the press conference and things like that. We chatted and talked about our bumps and bruises that we had. You know, I talked about my foot hurting. I kicked his elbow a few times and ended up tearing a ligament in my right thumb trying to push one of his tie clinches off. And he was talking about how his front leg was really killing him from the leg kicks and obviously his nose. So, yeah, man, we were just chatting, hanging out. And actually the next day we had to leave early. Went down to the front lobby, and there he was, had ice on his knee, and got to meet his honey, and you know, they're getting ready to have a kid, so we got to chat about that a little bit, and yeah, man, it was all good.
Well, I know you just mentioned a couple of bumps and bruises. How long do you expect it would take to heal from? I mean, me and Casper, we're not technically fighters, so we don't know how long it takes, but from the bumps and bruises that you mentioned, how long would it take you to be ready to fight again?
Well, I ended up hurting my left foot and my right foot. My shins are a little bruised up too, but I thought I ended up breaking my left foot kicking his elbow. I think it was in the second round, man. Just totally crushed my foot on his elbow. And so we got x-rays yesterday. Actually, it started feeling a whole lot better. So I actually did class, did a little moving around, a little bit of shadow boxing. The worst injury, I believe, is my right thumb. Ended up tearing a ligament in it, and doctors were talking about may having to do some surgery on it. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But yeah, man, so far right now, the worst injury is my right thumb. And hopefully we'll, you know, after that, if I do have to have surgery, it'll be a quick recovery.
For sure. I mean, you know, as far as what's next, it's no secret that people want to see you fight for the belt after, you know, that destruction of Johny Hendricks. Now that you've beaten Rory in his home country, what do you think this win does for your title campaign, and what is next for you?
You know, I'm on a 7-fight winning streak, man, and which is the most in the division. So you know, I beat the best guys in the division. I beat the number 2 guy, the number 1 guy. You know, finished Jake Ellenberger in the first round, Johny Hendricks in the first round, and man, I think they have to give it to me. You know, I think everybody's waiting to see how everything's going for the Tyrone and Robbie Lawler fight coming up. I'm really anxious to see that as well. So I'll definitely be keeping my eye on that. And yeah, man, I believe hopefully I'm trying to get that title shot in November in New York at Madison Square Garden. I think that's the place to do it.
You had a really funny moment after your fight where when you went to call out, you know, the champion, you said Robbie Lawler, but then you have to catch yourself for a second and be like, or Tyron Woodley if he wins. Can you just describe that situation? Because you're such a nice guy that I think you just wanted to be fair in that call out, but it ended up being pretty comical.
Yeah, man. I was thinking about who the champion was right now, completely forgetting that, you know, he's got a fight coming up, getting ready to face, you know, a tough guy, Tyron Woodley. But yeah, man, it was funny because my dad was yelling at me in the back saying, "Hey, man, we don't know who the champion is going to be, so you know, you don't need to be saying that." But you know, I think Robbie Lawler's got it. You know, he's the type of guy that to get stronger as the rounds go on. And if Tyrone doesn't finish Lawler in the first round, Tyrone's the type of guy who's been known to get tired as the rounds go on. So I believe that Lawler's going to end up winning this fight. And you know what? Just for my sake, I would love to fight Lawler just because he's been the champion longer, you know, and faced a lot of tough guys. For me to beat Lawler when, you know, nobody else has at the top of the game would be awesome.
Well, that was going to be my next question, why you wanted to fight Robbie specifically, but that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Robbie brings a very different style to Rory, and, you know, we know styles make fights. How do you see yourself matching up against him? And on paper, do you think he's a tougher test than Rory, or do you think that stylistically Rory was the stiffer style matchup?
Yeah, well, you know, I believe that, you know, Robbie Lawler, he's the toughest as they come. I mean, he's got basic striking, but he's got tons of heart. He's very tough, as you've seen in the past. His fights with Carlos Condit, Rory McDonald have all been really, really tough. And you know, he just came out there the 4th and 5th round and came back stronger. You know, he's just that kind of guy. But he is a guy that will stand there and try and bang it out with you. So, you know, I think it would be a good matchup for me, just the fact that he is the type of guy to stand there. I'd be able to use my stand-up, my movement, my angles to try and pick him apart. I don't think he would look for the takedown. I don't want to cut that out because I know he's a good wrestler as well. He's got a good ground game, but he's not afraid to stand and bang it out.
Well, we know you're originally from Simpsonville, South Carolina, and UFC 201 takes place next door in Atlanta, Georgia. Do you have any plans to attend UFC 201 and watch the title fight cage side?
You know, if I'm not able, I don't think I'll be able to make it there, but I will definitely be, desk side at. I think I'm one of the analysts on Fox Sports 1 for that one.
Hey, that's exciting.
How do you like that, by the way? Do you enjoy that? Because we were watching it. I thought you did a great job, but do you enjoy doing that? Is that maybe another career path down in the future once it's all said and done?
Oh, definitely. You know, I love to talk about fights. I love to analyze them and break them down. So, yeah, man, hopefully when my fight career is over, that's something I will, be able to fall back on.
I'm just curious, sorry to jump in there, Casper. What do you guys get up to during the commercial breaks? I always think about this because we see the stuff that sort of happens once it goes off. Do you guys hang out? Do you talk? Or is the person next to you like, sorry, I can't talk right now. I don't want to get all the good stuff out. And then you just sit in silence, just stare forwards. What goes on?
I don't think that can happen, especially when you got Daniel Cormier sitting next to you. Kenny Florin. All those guys are freaking phenomenal, man. And my first analyst job was like a month ago, and so they had to pick on the new guy, which was me, obviously. So they were pranking me, and it was all a blast, man. And I think that's why I felt so comfortable out there, because they made me feel at home. It's like talking to a group of guys around at the bar, just hanging out. That's how how it felt, and that's how they made you feel. So it was a blast.
What kind of pranks? What kind of pranks did they pull on you?
It's things like pulling my chair out from underneath me and acting like the cameras were on, so they started talking. So I'm sitting there, not knowing what's going on and thinking I'm missing something, and it's fun, man. I mean, Daniel Cormier is hilarious. But as soon as the commercial's on, everybody grabs their phones.
Yeah.
Did anybody go for like any Anchorman jokes? Any whale's vagina? Any kind of stuff like that?
Smelly pirate hooker?
Nothing like that.
All right. Well, we got to ask, even though Lawler and Woodley is on the horizon, your division may get a big shake-up soon, enough with the possible and likely return of GSP. What was your reaction when you heard the news that George, is apparently ready to return?
Man, I thought it was pretty cool. I really didn't know why exactly he would be coming back. I mean, I know he's probably making more money outside the UFC than he ever was in, but growing up and being a fighter, that's just something that you miss. And he's still a young guy. He's not old at all. I mean, I think he's still in his prime. But the question was, where is he going to go? Is he going to go stay at 170? Is he going to drop to 155 or even go up to 185? I think that's the question everybody's thinking right now.
Well, I mean, you've had a bit of a relationship with TriStar. Have you heard anything? Have you spoken to anyone? I mean, I don't know what your relationship with GSP is like, but what have you heard, and what do you think would make sense for him?
I'm not really sure. Either stay at 170 or maybe even try, because I know he's a little bit shorter than me. I don't even know if he can get to 155, but I think he would definitely make a huge splash there as well. But, man, I mean, he's one of the best welterweights who ever stepped in there. It would be cool to see him fight a welterweight again. I mean, he's a monster, man. But I think for him, where his level is now, a super fight would be where it's at. Either going up in weight, maybe fight Bisping, because he's a big guy.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, people talked about the relationship between you and Rory, and I feel like you and GSP would have a stronger one because I believe you guys actually sparred. What can you tell us about your relationship with George?
George, it was great, man. Kind of like it is with Rory. I mean, most of the time that I spent TriStar was for George, so I got to hang out with him and spend more time with him. Very cool guy, man. Very respectful and a true martial artist. I mean, he lives the martial arts every day. Even though he's not fighting, the guy trains every day. Jiu-jitsu. He still travels to Renzo Gracie's to train there. He's always going to the wrestling gym, wrestling there, doing mitt work. I'm seeing on Instagram. He texted me and congratulated me after the fight with Rory McDonald, and just a very respectful guy.
I'm curious because obviously you've got a lot of big wins and you've done a lot of things in the division. You guys are friends, but despite all that, does it worry you at all that GSP might be given the next title shot ahead of you?
I don't think so, man. I mean, I believe they want big things for him if he does come back. So I'm thinking maybe they're going to do like a big,
him versus Brock Lesnar.
Something, man, like a big money fight,
Well, here's one for you. If he does return, hypothetically was able to either win the bout, or even if you were the champion and he was the number one contender, would you have any issues with facing him?
I would, just the fact that he, I've known him for a very long time and been a part of his camps for a long time. But I think he knows what my goal is. and that's to be the title. I've worked really, really hard this year, and since I've stepped foot in the octagon to get there, we'll see, man.
Do you think, out of respect, he might leave the welterweight division alone just because, you guys have that relationship and he knows that, he's got two friends in it, yourself and Rory McDonald. He sort of said in the past, like, look, it's Rory's time to shine. Doesn't look like Rory's going to get that title shot, but do you think he'd sort of do that for you maybe?
Maybe. I mean, he's that type of guy. He is a very nice guy, and maybe, man, he probably could possibly do that.
It's interesting you mentioned how big he is, but in a matchup against Michael Bisping, if this thing does go down, how do you think it goes? Can he beat Bisping? Because a lot of people believe that he has the skills to beat Bisping and win that middleweight title.
I think he does. Against Bisping, man, his striking is very good. He's got great wrestling. He's a very, very strong guy. That is definitely a possibility. I believe he can go out there and probably beat Bisping. Not taking anything away from Bisping, but, he's a very tough guy. But George is just... man, he's an animal.
If he does become the middleweight champion, we've been having this discussion, trying to figure it all out. How do you think he would go? Because there's a few crazy animals in the division. Obviously, Chris Weidman's one. Luke Rockholder's one. A lot of, Jacare's in there. A lot of tough matchups. Do you think he does well against those guys if he does become champion?
If he would fight Bisping, I don't think it would be for the title. I think it would just be a money fight just because, for him to be out for so long, then go out there and straight go for a title would be unfair for a lot of the fighters in the division, So I don't know if they would go that route, but in a just a big money fight, I think you would beat Bisping, yes.
Wow, there you go. Stephen, we really appreciate the time you're giving us. We just got a few more questions and then we'll get out of your hair. I want to sort of circle back to you. You made the call out in the middle of the octagon after you win. When we spoke to you last time, you mentioned that your management, they might need to put a bit of heat on the UFC and guarantee you that next title shot. Is that still the plan?
I believe so. If they don't give it to me, I believe my management company, they're very good at that. And, going out there, talking to the UFC, talking to Dana White and trying to get things figured out. So I know they have my back 100% on this, and that's what we're going for.
We know Dana White wasn't there, but did you get a chance to speak to him at all, or was a part of you really tempted to shoot him a sneaky text or just give him a sneaky call and just be like, hey, what's going on, Dana? Where's my next shot?
No, I didn't get to really talk to him, and if I had his number, I definitely would have shoot him a text.
Yeah. Send him an emoji. There's some funny emojis you can send him. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it, man. That would be hilarious.
You give him the old, you pretend you need to talk about something else. I just got this quick question. And then, why I got you on the phone? How about that title shot? Now that you're here.
Yeah, your house is on fire. Call me instantly so I can tell
That would be great, man. Just sneak it in there somehow.
Second last question. We're doing some predictions. While on the subject of 170, of course, your weight class, Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, they'll be making another pass through your division at UFC 202. Just wondering what your thoughts are on the matchup, who you think comes out victorious the second time around.
Well, I believe that Conor McGregor will definitely be in shape. I'm not saying that Nate Diaz was, because I know he had it was like a 2 weeks notice. Mm-hmm. But man, I just don't think maybe McGregor maybe prepared himself for that fight like he should. Nate Diaz had been finished by some questionable guys. Maybe McGregor thought it was going to be an easy fight. I don't know, but they're both going to come in shape. They're both going to be hungry. I know Conor McGregor is. So, man, I expect they're going to be a war. I think it's going to go all 5 or 3 or 5 rounds, I believe. So, how it goes.
Who do you think
really
wins the war,
that
though?
Fight. Oh man. That's a
this
hard
is some
one.
Of that analyst. You're going to be an analyst for
Yes.
that other card.
I know
this is good practice.
The thing is that those Diaz brothers are so good at luring people into their game plan, standing in front of them and just duking it out. And they're so durable. They're very durable. And I think Conor McGregor knows that. I think he's going to use more movement this time, in and out movement. He pace himself a little bit. So I think Conor McGregor may come back with the win on this one.
All right, Stephen, all the Australian fans are listening, the New Zealand fans are listening, American, the world is listening. As we wrap up, what's the message? What do you want to get out there that'll land you the next title shot?
Man, the message is, man, I've done, I think, what the fans and what the UFC expected of me. I went out there and finished some guys in the first round, went 5 rounds, unanimous decision against Rory McDonald, the number 1 contender. Give me that title shot, guys. I guarantee it will be a war and an exciting fight.
Oh, there you guys go. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Wonderboy MMA. Lots of great stuff there. And if you're lucky enough, go to a class with him. I can't believe you're doing it. You're injured. You just had your fight, and you're still doing classes. It's unbelievable, man. Best of luck, and we look forward to seeing you on the screen breaking down some fights.
Thanks, guys. Y'all have a good one.
Hi guys, it's Joanna Jędrzejczyk, UFC strawweight champion. Listen to Submission Radio.
Alright guys, considering that we are nearing ever closer to the milestone UFC 200, a pinnacle in the company's history, we figured it'd be fun to explore the company's past and roots with our next guest. He is a man who is not only an award-winning television producer, but also a key component in the UFC's history, as he is famously known for being its co-creator back in 1993 and executive producer for the first 20 pay-per-view events. Campbell McLaren, welcome to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
Thank you. Glad to be talking to you guys. And yeah, UFC 200, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that that's the number. When I think back 23 years ago, I had started working on the UFC. November, being the date that's 23 years of the pay-per-view. But, I was working on this with Julian and Art Davey, in the spring 23 years ago. And I envisioned I did a deal with Julian Gracie for 3 shows as a minimum. So I knew we were going to do 3. But, I wasn't sure we'd have 197 after that. So it's pretty amazing. And congrats to, Dana and Lorenzo. It's really good. I'm very, very proud. No longer work with the UFC. Very friendly with the UFC. And, work closely with them with Combate Americas, my Hispanic MMA promotion. But I still feel a sense of pride, and if I may say, a sense of ownership. I brought in Joe Rogan, I brought in Joe Silva, I helped create the Octagon. I built out the production team. Famously went out with There Are No Rules and banned in 49 states and all that kind of stuff. So, it's funny when I go to the UFCs. It's a bit like, a school reunion, because I do know everyone. And a lot of it looks very similar to what I do. However, so much has changed. It's interesting when you look at it, because it's very much the same, and yet so much has changed. And I think we think about this. When in life have we had a chance to watch a sport develop? Right? I mean, if you're a soccer fan, boxing fan, whatever sport you like, they've been around for a while. And here we have a sport literally developing before our eyes. So I just find that really amazing.
We want to ask you about your vision for the idea of UFC. We've heard a few people say you had a Mortal Kombat in mind as one of the inspirations. Is this true?
No, that's absolutely true. And, if you think about it, television is a very visual medium, right? And very distinct, very different from radio, right? And how you approach it is, what is it going to look like? And Mortal Kombat had this great look, right? And it wasn't finish him. That wasn't what did it. It was just seeing all the different martial arts represented. Because remember, UFC 1 was not MMA, right? It was martial art versus martial art. They were not yet mixed. They were mixed pretty quickly, But remember, that first one is karate versus boxing versus sumo versus jiu-jitsu. So what we had was a chance to put together an amazing lineup of fighters, each with a very distinct visual style. And, for the people that actually have seen UFC 1, which in some ways, is remarkable for a lot of reasons. One being it's probably the worst announcing team in the history of sports. I almost proudly say that. But it's also when you saw that first fight, when Taylor Tooley, this sumo wrestler, comes charging out against Gerard Gordeau, and Gordeau is wearing the savate pants, and Taylor Tooley's in kind of a tinta cloth, kind of Samoan motif, sumo sort of kilt. And when he comes charging across the octagon and Gerard Gordeau backs up, slapping him, kicks his feet out from under him, he lands on his big sumo butt, and Gerard Gordeau just smacks him in the face and then kicks his teeth out. And then when anyone that saw that, and the fight was, I think, 28 seconds, if you saw that, you went, oh, my God, what did I just see? Right? You've never seen anything like that. Or maybe in the movies, but never real.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I saw that, and I'm in the truck, the mobile production unit that's the headquarters for the TV show, I thought, that was 28 seconds. We're in a 3-hour time block. That means the show's going to be over in about 11 minutes. What am I going to do for the other 2 hours and 41 minutes? But, that's how unpredictable that first one was. And, again, pointing out how different things are and how much the same they are. The UFC doesn't look like that anymore. One, this weight classes, it just doesn't look like that anymore. However, I'll say MMA remains, I think, the most unpredictable sport that exists. There are so many variables. You have a fight on the ground. You have a fight standing up. You have the transition area between the two. The UFC is as unpredictable at 200 as it was at 1. Looks very different, feels very different, but it's still that unpredictability. And that's what I think one of the things that makes the sport great.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And you spoke about looks. I mean, we've heard about the alligator moat and the electrified fence. What are some of the other crazy ideas floating around that were scrapped from the final product, when you guys were talking ideas and its concept?
Yeah. Well, the alligator moat is Rorion Gracie's idea of a joke, by the way. And because just take a moment to think about that. Where are the cameramen going to go if there's an alligator moat?
They could ride the alligators.
They can go to Disneyland.
I guess so. So that was it. That was Horion's idea. Just that's Horion's sense of humor. But if you think about it, it's almost crazier than that in a way. Because before we came up with the octagon, we were trying to figure out how do you contain the action. You can't put it in a boxing ring because the guys go flying out or throw each other out. So originally, I thought to use plexiglass walls, and because it would be great to shoot through. The cameramen would have clear views, and Horion pointed out, what if one guy slams the other into the plexiglass wall? That's going to leave a mark. So the plexiglass walls were out, and then we looked at a kind of like nylon, very fine nylon mesh, like a super fine version of pantyhose. And again, though, if you took someone's face and pushed it into that, they wouldn't be able to breathe. So, we came up with the idea, and it was Jason Cousins is the designer, and he'd done a lot of movie sets and done a lot of stuff. And so he came up with the idea of the chain link fence because it had a very urban, sort of Mad Max-esque feel to it, right? It was kind of a post-apocalyptic look. I did want to put razor wire on the top. Fake Hollywood razor wire. But everybody said, that's too much. And I think they were right. I mean, even if we lost it after the first couple of events. And then, so what you had in the octagon, of course, is based on Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie Conan the Barbarian fought in a stone octagon. And Arnold was a big supporter of the early UFCs. And John Milius, who directed the Conan movies and, was a writer and director in Hollywood, he suggested an octagon as the shape. He also suggested Greek columns, which I thought were kind of dorky, but he did like the octagon. John Milius wrote Dirty Harry. He wrote a lot of the dialogue for Apocalypse Now, like I love the smell of napalm in the morning. So you didn't say dorky to his face, by the way. I left the meeting and then said, that's dorky. So you hear there were a lot of influences there. You have, action movies in Hollywood version with, Conan the Barbarian. You have an urban sort of super hyper realistic feel with the chain link. And then you have all the rejected ideas, including, pantyhose walls and alligator moats. So, it was fun. It was fun. And we just, we finished building and designing and painting the octagon about 2 hours before the first event.
Wow.
So there was the UFC 1 was the pilot program, by the way. There was no test. It was, it was start the show.
Yeah,
That's crazy, Campbell. And obviously, you mentioned earlier on in the interview
by the way.
It's so crazy, but I feel like in the world of MMA, it's almost like people aren't shocked by it because there's crazier things that happen. But let's talk about Joe Rogan for a second. You mentioned that you were the one who actually brought him in. I'm just curious, what was it about a young Joe Rogan that interested you for the commentator position? What made you think he'd do well in that position?
Well, Joe's perfect, and he almost was perfect to start with. Before I got into the pay-per-view business, I had a deep background in stand-up comedy. I ran a very famous comedy club in New York called Caroline's, and I managed Larry David, Joey Behar, a number of famous comedians, and I knew a lot of comedians and loved comedy. And Rogan had this sort of muscular style of stand-up comedy. Like if he was heckled, he you could see in his mind, he was thinking, do I say something funny in response or do I wade into the audience and kick the guy's ass? It was real. You saw that in his face. It's like, I could beat the crap out of that guy, but I'll just mock him instead. And, he'd had a couple either pro fights or semi-pro fights as a kickboxer. And he was a tough guy and he was a big mouth, but very likably so, right? And his manager, Jeff Sussman, who manages Kevin James, who was King and Queens and has done a lot of movies, Jeff and I were very good friends, and I've seen Joe's act, and I said I'd love to give him a trial because he came in on UFC 11. The things were so unpredictable that a lot of sports commentators that we tried, and commentators would get stuck. And they wouldn't know what to say, and they wouldn't know how to cover it. And so I figured a comedian would always have like a funny line. And it's also nonplussed at almost any active, right? Because you're used to being heckled. And you grow up in the clubs, and those can be pretty rough and tumble. So I knew Joe could handle it. He really looked the part, right? I mean, now he looks like he could have been a fighter. But back then, he fit in very well. And he was smart, and he was passionate. He came out to the UFC, and he said, he goes, this is the most disorganized thing I've ever seen. It's fantastic, and he just took to it right away. So I think he was perfect for it. He could talk. He was tough. He started picking up. He fell in love with jiu-jitsu right away. He was really perfect for the job. As was Joe Silva, my two Joes, right? I mean, Joe was sort of my, I don't want to say assistant because he wasn't in any administrative capacity. He was kind of like an idea guy that, had a lot of thoughts. And by UFC 3, he had this full-blown idea of what it should be. I was like, what are you thinking? We haven't even figured this out yet. How can you, And he would take yellow legal pads, right? This is before people send emails. The internet isn't fully developed, 1993, 94. And Joe would take those yellow legal pads that attorneys use, and he would fill in every page with notes and give that to me. And a lot of them were, you're a moron, you should be doing that. He would write stuff like that.
Wow.
But, he's really smart, and, and in a lot of ways, and I think only the real hardcore UFC fans know this, his mark on the sport is, his thumbprint is over everything, and the UFC style of fighting, the UFC matches, what it takes to get in the UFC, what it takes to get thrown out of the UFC, that's to a great extent Joe's work. And Sean Shelby, who does the smaller weight classes too, is up to the task too. But a lot of it in the past was, Joe's idea of this world-class competition where if you couldn't measure up, you were out. And that's how he looks at it. And if someone has a weakness, he matches against that weakness. And I think, again, that's a great strength of MMA. And boxing famously will find fighters to match against a strength, right? So that the champ or the marquee fighter is playing against an opponent who plays well against his champ's strength. Joe Silva doesn't do that. He kind of does the opposite. And that's another thing I think makes the sport great.
For sure. Now, I want to ask about something specific because, we're going back in time here, but one of the reasons behind the UFC's initial success was also what led to its temporary downfall, and that's the marketing. Some of the known catchphrases included 2 men enter and 1 man leaves, there are no rules, ban your foot in our states, and you famously told the New York Times death is cheap, maybe it's just $14.95. And while it did garner a lot of interest and controversy, it did also lead the sport to being banned in most states around the country and, then eventually sold. Do you regret promoting the UFC in such a way back then?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There wouldn't be 200 if I hadn't done that. Right? And it's funny. I know Australia had a great deal of controversy, whether it was going to be legal or not. And there's an MMA writer and boxing commentator named Kevin Ioli, who's a good friend. And, he said to me recently when New York finally passed MMA, he said, you created an ad campaign that, like, to Coca-Cola, I want to teach the world to sing. He said it's lasted 25 years. Because people are still talking, 2 men enter, 1 man leaves, or banned in 49 states. We did it in 6 states, by the way. And, I don't expect you to know everything there is about the U.S., but you might know there's 50 states. So if we were banned in 49 and I did it in 6, nobody ever asked me about that. But I'll tell you, here's the reality of it. The controversy did hurt, and John McCain was a very powerful man, ultimately, ran for president of the U.S., and he hated it and was trying to establish a national boxing commission and use the UFC as an example of what happens to unregulated combat sports. But I'll tell you something. You have to really Lorenzo and Dana were absolutely awesome in what they did. They took a broken-down franchise that had lost all its energy and was really in a bad place. And they didn't reinvigorate it. They brought it back to life. They gave it new life. They took it to a world-class level. I always knew the UFC was going to be a big hit. There was no doubt in my mind. I knew it was going to be a big hit. I did not envision it as a world-class sport considered perhaps as an Olympic sport in the next few Olympics, right? I didn't see it as a world-class sport, but I knew it was going to be a hit. Remember, when I did the UFC, if you do a pound-for-pound comparison to today, the buy rates I was doing on pay-per-view with 20 million pay-per-view homes is now over 100 million pay-per-view homes. Comparable buy rates to what I did would be 1.5 million buys. We were doing, particularly the first 12, which are my real hands-on UFCs, we were doing spectacular buy rates. I was on, we were on every TV show. We were on a season of Friends with Courtney Cox's boyfriend enters the UFC. Every magazine was writing about it. Virtuosity, the Denzel Washington film, was centered at the UFC. We were huge. We were in popular culture in a way that's hard to imagine today. And it was a phenomenon, and it was extraordinary and extraordinarily profitable. And we did very, very well. I worked for a company, Bertelsmann, a big giant media company based in Germany, and we did exceptionally well. Now, what happens is the pressure gets ratcheted up. Cable starts to turn it off. It gets harder and harder to find states that are willing to put it on. And it becomes a real tough period. And, because I'd done things like this, the New York Times interview, I was, forced out of the company because I was sort of the lightning rod for, criticism. And, and maybe that was a good move, maybe not. There was nobody there with a vision of what the UFC was to become once I left, right? That was left for Lorenzo and Dana to pick it up. But you can't go, did that make trouble, and so should you not have done it? What else would we have done with minimal marketing budgets? No social media, right? You got to go back to 1993. I know it's hard for anyone to envision a world without Twitter, but that was a world without Twitter. And so what we did is literally call every martial art dojo in the U.S. and told them to watch. We had very bare bones marketing budgets. We had no stars, right? There wasn't a Brock Lesnar to bring over, right? And so what we did is with Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie, of course, and Don Frye. I love the interview you did with Don, by the way. He's a real character. And a lot of the people that did real justice to the UFC by by their fights and by their persona helped build this. And I would say, yes, the controversy ended up hurting, but it's what launched it. And there's no two ways around that. That's what launched it, right? And, you know, Big John, the UFC ref, you know, he is still pissed off at me because to an extent, I wrote the checks he had to cash, right? He had to stand in the octagon and conduct, you know, the rules when I'm running around saying there are no rules. So, you know, he often says in Southern California, there was a real interest in jiu-jitsu, particularly Gracie jiu-jitsu. And he said that it would have been successful without that controversy. But the thing was, in Philadelphia and Detroit and Buffalo, New York, and in New Jersey and in North Carolina and all the rest of the U.S., there was absolutely people didn't even know what jiu-jitsu was. You know, they would have thought that was some sort of Japanese recipe. You know, and without that controversy and without the appeal of a super real, gritty, anything goes contest, it would never gotten off the ground. You know, it would have been one and done, right? So, and by the very nature of this, look, this 23 years later, and you're still asking me about this, right? So that's the power of this. You know, people believed it was authentic, real. Anything could happen, and it was an antidote to glam rock, overproduced Hollywood films, you know, 80s and 90s hair bands, sitcoms, you know, all the sort of phony baloney stuff we all saw throughout the world in the 90s. And then the UFC came through and just went, damn, this is no bullshit. This is what we're going to do. This is what it looks like. This is for real. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. That never happened, by the way. Everyone left. You know, and then, as I said, no one ever counted the number of states we were doing it in. And at the first UFC, we had a rules meeting. So there was never no rules. But nobody ever said, hey, Campbell, there are rules. And you've done this in 6 states. And 2 men always leave. You know, it worked and it registered, and it's what launched the UFC, and we wouldn't be on 200 if I hadn't done it.
No, certainly. I mean, it's just crazy, like you mentioned, still alive and well all these years later. Now, you sold the UFC for $2 million. Now there's been a lot of rumors about another potential sale of the company, either in its entirety or a portion. Now, Flow Combat recently reported that Zuffa has sold the company to investment group entirely. It's a majority sale. Nothing's been confirmed yet, but what are your thoughts on this? And why would the UFC want to sell? In your opinion, is it a good thing or a bad thing?
There's 4 or 5 great questions in that. I'll back up and try to start at the beginning. I didn't sell the UFC. I was an employee of Bertelsmann and was not with the UFC when it was sold to the Fertittas. I believe in my heart of hearts, if I owned the UFC, I never would have sold it. I would have hibernated it and waited because I was just too close to it. I loved it. You know, I felt like I gave birth to it. You know, and I wouldn't sell. I have 3 kids. I love them. I'm not selling my kids. I wouldn't have sold the UFC. But, you know, you got to ask yourself, I don't think the Flow report, I don't think any of the reports are correct, by the way. And, you know, I looked into potentially buying the UFC, too, with some very famous investment groups based in the U.S.
When was this? Was this recently, Campbell?
This was this year.
Oh, wow.
And I think you guys are getting the scoop on this. I haven't talked about this in the media. And, you know, investment bankers and private equity firms are notoriously press shy. So I'm going to avoid naming names. But we had what we thought was a tremendous offer. And it was $2.8 billion. And, you know, which to me seems like a lot of money. But I think, you know,
to us too.
Point, right. I mean, that's a lot of money. But Lorenzo, and that was based on, you know, the sort of investment bank arithmetic, right? The UFC did $200 million in EBITDA, which is earnings before taxes and depreciation. It's roughly the profit. So last year they had a great year, right? They had Conor, they had Ronda, great year. And, you know, they did $200 million roughly in profit. So that's tremendous. And typically bankers, private equity firms might look at an earnings like that, and the range would be 12 to 14 times that would give you the value of the company. So 2.8 was on the high side. But I think Lorenzo is very forward thinking, you know, and he says, look, I'm building this tremendous platform around the world. And the UFC is a great success in Australia, right? Great success in the U.S. We're pretty good in Mexico, great in Canada, real traction in the U.K. But yet they have built out a platform in Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East that hasn't really come online yet. So I think Lorenzo looks at this and goes, we haven't even seen the real value of the UFC, so I want a lot of friggin' money, right? I don't want some banker's idea of what this is worth. I'm a visionary. I know this is worth a lot of money. So I do think he has a super high value on it. But when you get to that point, there's only a few people that really can enter into that sort of purchase, right? Investors typically are very disciplined. Professional investors are disciplined. It's sometimes very well-to-do individuals get caught up in the glamour of something and will overbid. And that's kind of where I think they are. I don't think the UFC has been sold. I don't think it's going to be announced on UFC 200. Now, they may have sold off a portion at a very high valuation that they can come back to later on and say, this is our valuation. Lorenzo is really smart. Dana has an instinctive feel for what the fans like, and he's a genius at that. But Lorenzo is a very visionary businessman and always saw this as something that could be the number one sport in the world. And I think that's what he's shooting for. And I'm including soccer, and I'm including Formula One, and I'm including boxing. He's going for MMA and the UFC to be the number one sport in the world. So that'll get you to some big numbers, what's going on? I don't know for sure, but I don't think it's sold.
Okay. And going back to when you said that you were looking to potentially purchase the UFC this year, was this the first time since 2001 that you had tried to buy the UFC, Campbell? And I'm wondering, what sort of changes were you looking to make in the company, if any, had you bought it?
It was the first time I looked at it. Now running Combate Americas, which is, a Spanish-speaking MMA franchise. We've had tremendous traction, tremendous growth, particularly in this year. And it's put me in a way in a business realm I hadn't been in before. As you said at the beginning of the show, as a TV producer and one of the creators of the UFC. Now, in this new role, going out and raising money, understanding the value of sports franchises, it put me in a little bit different world. And so I was able to look at the UFC and say, yes, I love it. And yes, I think it's fantastic. But this is also a chance to an extent, not own a sports franchise, own a sport, right? Because the UFC is used interchangeably with MMA. In fact, I think most people that are not fans don't know what MMA is. They say UFC.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. So you're not owning a franchise by buying the UFC. You're owning a sport. Imagine you can buy soccer, right? Or, Australian rules football. You buy the sport. That's what you're buying when you buy the UFC. So, it was interesting to look at it like that. And I think as I got into it, it helped me also realize the goals for my company, which in essence are to be a franchise that presents, in some ways, the most exciting fights you can see, because all my guys and girls are brand new. They're all looking to establish themselves, and they hate to have their fights go to the judges. So it's interesting when you start to look at this. The UFC is a style of fighting now, right? And there's a defensive side to it. If you're ahead on points, you maybe want to ride out time on the ground. You want to take your opponent down, control them, let the judges see that control. There's different things in a UFC fight in the last 5 years, they've created this sort of MMA style, right? And when you look at Combate Americas with Hispanic fighters, that martial art is really boxeo, is boxing. They prefer the stand-up fight, and they prefer to fight like crazy. So we just finished a series of events in Los Angeles. We did 4 Mondays in a row. And out of 8 fights that we put on TV, each night, 6 of the 8 were finishes. So if you look at that, it's like we're not going to the judges with these new fighters, because I've said this, and I don't mean this in any derogatory way. My fighters fight like puppies. They're not measuring, judging the distance. They're coming out and going, it's immediate, and it's not a brawl, because they're good at what they do, but they didn't come to win on a scorecard. You know, they can't. And in Mexican boxing tradition and Puerto Rican boxing tradition, a boxer can be ahead in the 12th round, and they still come out fighting. You know, the Mexican Americans talk about Sangre Azteca, you know, the Aztec blood. And, you know, and it's the same thing Conor McGregor talks about, you know, the Celtic warrior. You have a group of very proud people that have a very long warrior heritage that have been, to a great extent, colonized and run over by a powerful neighbor. And so there's this sense of pride that rarely gets to come out. And when you have a fighter that's Irish or Puerto Rican or Mexican, the feeling of, you know, national pride comes out and gives this an added incentive. It's funny, the UFC, to a great extent, is the world, you know, and what I'm presenting in some ways is like tribal conflict, you know, or more, maybe more like the World Cup. So, you know, I think that the UFC has become a style of fighting, and I think they're different styles. When you watch Combate, you know it's Combate. It looks very different. And to come back to the business point of view, the UFC has not only created huge value for themselves and built this empire, like Apple products, they have created a whole add-on economy as well. And I think that's where I fit in very, very well. Combate Americas can thrive alongside the UFC. We're different in our approach. We're different in the fighters. 170 is big for us. Hispanic fighters tend to be smaller. So, in 105, the girls, Kira Batara, our 105, is now ranked 6th in the world. Former cheerleader, cute as a button, does somersaults in her fight, and then beats the shit out of people. She's fantastic. Fantastic. Kira Batara is an exciting fighter, as you will see fighting today. Then we have a guy named Ricky Palacio, who is continually on the verge of losing his fight. From the moment the fight starts, you are sure he is losing. But I think Ricky's skull is, you know, his skull ridge, I think, is 3 inches thick. And I think you'd have to hit Ricky with a brick to actually knock him out. And then no matter what, so he's a perennial underdog, and he swings the entire time. So you start to see the UFC has built the sport, but it's also built it to the extent that there's other things that can work in and around it. And that's really what Combate Americas is. It's a counterpart, it's an alternative. It's, like I said, it's an add-on product to the UFC. I hope you guys didn't want short answers, you know, because most
No. This is great. This is great. I mean, I feel like us and the fans are learning a lot about Combate. Let's talk about the future of Combate. Obviously, you mentioned your place with the UFC, but what are some of the plans that you guys have for the future that fans can look forward to?
Well, I think, you know, like I said, we're starting to grow really, really quickly and develop this style that I think is a more active fight, a much more aggressive fight, a lot of fun to watch. You know, I will tell you honestly, we have few fighters at this point that are ready to go into the UFC because they're very, very young. They're very talented. But I think what Combate is going to see as they mature, we're going to have some real world-class athletes. I mentioned Kira Batara, Ricky Palacio, Gustavo Lopez, who Misha Tate manages, Eric Sanchez, that Uriah Faber manages. So what we've shown is that we can be a great place for new talent. They will get more attention with us. They'll get more money with us. They'll get more TV exposure. And, you know, we celebrate these new talents. You know, I've never been able to figure out what Bellator is. You know, I don't know. And, you know, and I make jokes at their expense that it's, you know, the UFC retirement home. You know, but guys who have choice intent, I mean, because they're still drawing a crowd. You know, and let me make a point around that. People talk to me, you're not the first one to ask me, what's the controversy, the right way to go? Each time I'm answering it, by the way, I think I'm getting more vigorous in the defense of the controversy. But I'll tell you, I think it wasn't just the controversy that created the UFC. I think it was this sort of the heroic, epic stance of the fighters. Because, you know, no one knew who Royce Gracie was. No one knew who Ken Shamrock was till that first fight. And the tournament became an epic way to showcase someone. And if you look at it, I would say to you that Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie and Tito Ortiz, are the biggest stars Bellator has. And they're from 23 years ago. So I think there was a epicness to the early UFC. It was certainly controversial, but the fighters were bigger than life. And a lot of that had to do with the tournament, right? To see a man fight 3 times in one night, that's epic. That's awesome. So I think that as we look at it, I'm still trying to figure out, what is Bellator? And to an extent, what is World Series of Fights should be the guys that get expelled from the UFC. That's what it should be, like, the bad boy school of UFC. But, other than the UFC and Combate, I don't see a real clear persona to the other fight organizations. I know what the UFC is. We all do. I know what Combate is. It's new, young Hispanic fighters that are fighting like crazy because it's a great opportunity for them. But what are the other things? They're like, watch me because I'm sort of like the UFC. Wow, did I answer the question at all? I can't even tell anymore. It's more like I'm making a speech.
Well,
your questions are good. They're too easy to answer in a long, convoluted way. They're good questions.
Well, you're certainly bringing a lot of insight and giving us a lot to think about. Now, I've got to ask you, you mentioned the Don Fry interview before. You mentioned how much you like Don Fry. Will you be there for UFC 200 to watch Don Fry get inducted into the Hall of Fame?
No, I'm not going to be there. I would like to be there, but I have a conflict, as they say. So I wish Don the best. He's the greatest. Another one of those epic fights, right? Just came in to destroy people. I'm not sure. I don't think Don ever thought it was a sport, by the way. I think he thought it was a hunting competition.
I would agree with you. Yeah, I can believe that.
It's crazy how everything's come around. Campbell, we really appreciate the time. So many exciting things happening with Combate. You have to return and talk to us some more about it because it feels like we have so much more to talk about. Guys, make sure to follow Campbell on Twitter at Campbell Combate. And for the Australian listeners, Campbell, where's the best place for them to check out all the latest news and updates on what's happening with Combate?
Well, on Twitter, we have great conversations about not only Combate Americas, but Ken is on there, Hoist is on there, Lorenzo Fertitta. We have great conversations about the early days of Campbell Combate, so it's well worth following me. And I try to respond to everybody that reaches out. But of course, you can see Combate Americas on UFC's Fight Pass. We do the English language version on Fight Pass. We do Spanish in the U.S. on NBC Universo. But if you want to check it out, UFC Fight Pass, which is great. So they carry our events live, and they have our full library on there.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, the UFC flyweight champion of the world, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is one of the busiest people in MMA. He's an ESPN analyst, World Series of Fighter commentator, successful podcaster, T-shirt mogul, and now he brings his own submission underground grappling series to Flow Combat, the American Gangster himself, Chael Sonnen. Welcome back to Submission Radio.
Gentlemen, good to be here.
It is always great when you come on. Thank you so much for coming on the program. We know how busy you are, so we'll jump straight into it. Chael, last weekend, Fedor Emelianenko had a difficult performance against Fabio Maldonado. Many disagreed with the decision. When we saw you tweeted out, "Bum," what did you make of the fight?
Maldonado, I thought, should have won that fight. It should have been stopped in the very first round. In a best-case scenario, Fedor ends up with the draw. I think there's good reason to believe that Fedor won rounds 2 and 3. But, look, if the first round wasn't a 10-8, then 10-8 just doesn't exist. It should have been stopped. It was corrupt. The entire thing was corrupt. And that's what you get when you go to Russia. I was a little surprised that Maldonado had his feelings hurt. I think Maldonado's the only guy in the world that thought he was going to get a fair shake in Russia.
People aren't as keen on seeing Fedor in the UFC after that performance. Do you think Dana White will still pursue him to have a couple of fights with the company?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Fedor is gonna come over to the UFC. There's nobody on the roster that he could beat, and I don't think there's anybody that he wants to fight. He's pretty clear in what his business plan is, which is to go out and fight the easiest guy possible and keep the mystique going. And it's not a bad plan. That's actually not meant to be a knock on him. He's selling tickets and drawing attendance and getting away with it. But
yeah, I mean, the UFC is a whole nother deal. But if somebody wants to see Fedor get beat up, you know, it is what it is.
Well, let me ask you this, Chael. If he does go over to the UFC, if the UFC says, all right, we want to bring in Fedor, what is in it for the UFC themselves? Because we've spoken to you in the past about Fedor. Is he a draw? Is he not a draw? What does this UFC get out of this?
Yeah, I think they finally got to have Fedor. I think it just was a goal, something they wanted to do. He's not going to be a terrible draw, but he's not going to do great. I mean, if he's asking for a reasonable number, if he wants $200,000 or $250,000 to show up, I think that pencils. If he wants the $5 million, that he could have had before and did not take, well, yeah, he might as well just light that money on fire. But I don't know what the UFC has in it. The UFC does get it wrong sometimes. Sometimes, they live in a bubble. All of us do. You guys, all of us that are in this industry, we live in a bubble, and we don't always see outside of it. Fedor is a big name in the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a reality that people don't know who he is. Now, that would have changed years ago. It wasn't because he didn't have the skills. It was just, if you don't fight in the UFC, people just simply don't know who you are in North America. It's a North American company. If he could have got that clock started years ago, I wouldn't be making these statements. He would have been a big name. But the reality is, the average person in America just doesn't know who he is.
Well, it's not 2009 anymore, but would you still be interested in seeing him fight Brock Lesnar if it ever came together in the future in the UFC?
Yeah, well, see, and I'm one of those guys that lives in the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I tell you about Fedor, it sounds like I'm real negative on him. The reality is I want to see him fight because I live in that bubble. I tune in to see him fight any one of those guys, and I don't make believe that he's going to beat them, but I think he brings something to the table. I think that he brings a presence. I want to see him make that walk, get in the octagon. I want to see him do the whole bit. So, yeah, there's no doubt I'd tune in to see him. Against anybody, it wouldn't just have to be Brock. You throw in 100 different names. I'm buying it, but I'm in that bubble. I still have to be cognizant of the fact that the little old lady in Iowa turning on her TV to FS1 doesn't know who in the hell he is.
I can just picture that little old lady watching Fedor make his UFC debut. Now, Joe, we want to quickly discuss UFC 200, in particular Brock Lesnar making his big return against Marc Hunt. Striking and his reaction to punches has always been, heavily criticized. Are you surprised Lesnar agreed to this fight?
Yes, I was, but pleasantly. I'm impressed. Lesnar came out and did an interview with Paul Heyman. I took it as close to a shoot as you were going to get, as close to the real Brock as you were going to get. And Paul asked him, "Why are you doing this?" And he just said, "I want to." He said, "I didn't leave the way I wanted to. I didn't have the performance I wanted to. And it's not about winning or losing. It's going out and performing to the best of my abilities, and I didn't do that." And I get it. As an athlete that's also retired, you do think about those things. That's true. You do think, well, I could have done better that night, or maybe I didn't warm up this way, or maybe this happened the night before that wasn't the best me. And those are the things that keep you up when you think about your own competitive career. So, I believed him, and I like it, and I respect it, and the fact that he's stepping in there with such a hard opponent, good for him. Brock's never taken the easy way. That's one thing about that son of a bitch. He's never had an easy fight.
No, he's had a whole bunch of difficult fights. It is interesting that he's going with this one. We have to ask Chael, how do you see this going? Because a lot of people are saying Hunt's going to go in there and knock him out. But then at the other side of the coin, he's a really good wrestler. And on the ground, he may have the advantage. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, and he wasn't a really good wrestler. He was an effective wrestler. I'll put this in perspective for you. In the NCAA, when he won his national title, he was 265 pounds, which was the limit. In the finals, he had a guy that was 220 pounds, and he had to go into double overtime with him. There's not very many wrestlers alive, if any, that if they had a 45-pound weight advantage, couldn't put that guy away in about 30 seconds. So he was an effective wrestler, but, he had some size, and he had a lot of things on it, a lot of other things that helped to get his hand raised. It wasn't skill and technique. He kept good position. He was a good competitor. And he achieved some really great things. So I don't think that a guy as short as Hunt is just going to get bum rushed and taken down. You got to understand, Brock hasn't been in the ring in 5 years. Hunt was the number one contender within the last calendar year. So, no, you don't have to exactly be an MMA expert to be able to see how this fight goes. Hunt's going to wreck him. But Brock's still stepping in there. And, he's a once-in-a-lifetime attraction. If Brock's fighting, you don't want to miss it. And this truly will be his last fight. Anytime there's speculation, is this going to be the guy's last fight? that helps to draw. That helps make you, I don't want to miss it if it's last one. Well, for sure, this is Brock's last fight. So, yeah, man, people want to see it. I'm one of those people.
Just curious. So if Brock Lesnar wins, do you think there's any chance he fights again, or do you think that's it anyway, even if he does beat Marc decisively?
No, he's done either way, but a win would make that even stronger, right? Either way, he's only getting in there this one last time. But with a win, yes, he could ride off. He could hold his head high. He could never have to look back. That's how a fighter wants to go out. It's very, very, very rare that a fighter gets to go out on a win. Usually it's a losing streak, and you call it a career. St-Pierre, in fact, is the only guy that comes to mind that was able to go out with a victory. So, no, if he was able to beat Marc Hunt, if he was able to get him down and keep him there and do damage enough to win the contest, that would help him go out with a positive feeling. Either way, he's going out, but he could go out with a positive feeling if that happened.
You mentioned George St-Pierre, and I want to get to him in 2 seconds, but before we do, you've spoken about McGregor has long been the biggest draw in MMA, but do you believe Lesnar is bigger than both McGregor and Rousey when he makes his comeback at UFC 200?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about this, but Rousey was never the draw that she was advertised as. She never did the pay-per-view numbers or the live gates that was advertised. It was always Conor, by a lot. During that era where there was a debate between those two, that Conor was the money guy, and why it was promoted and marketed differently, I don't know, but it was just that it was promotion and marketing. It was not reality. And yes, Lesnar crushes them both. They're not even comparable. When you talk about the biggest UFC of all time and the biggest, you never bring up UFC 100. It was such an anomaly. It's like it's taken off the board. They did 1.75 million. So, yes, Lesnar without a doubt is the biggest attraction the UFC's ever seen.
Well, you mentioned GSP before. As everybody by now knows, he was on the MMA hour and gave the impression that he'd like to make a comeback against Michael Bisping. Just wondering, what was your reaction on the news, and does the fight between Bisping and GSP make sense to you, Chael?
I loved it. I want to see George back in there. I didn't think it would happen when he turned down UFC 200, particularly the way that his contract and the thresholds and the bonus structure works. He was looking at anywhere from $12 to $15 million. Now he's going to be looking more at $4 to $5.3 million. So I was a little surprised that if he turned down 200, why or if he would ever come back. And I still don't have the answer to that. I still think that the card to come back for was UFC 200, but he didn't do it. So, if he wants to come back, I'm all for it. And if he wants a title shot with Bisping, he's going to get it.
I mean, that'd be a big fight. Who do you believe wins that one? And if GSP wins, does it make sense for him to be the middleweight champion of the world?
Yeah, I think that GSP would win. And does it make sense? Sure, it does. It's a very rare thing. And again, it might be a one-off. I don't know that he would defend that belt. I think that he likes the matchup. He likes that opponent. He likes that it's a world title fight in a different division. I think he likes those things. I don't know that he wants to get in there with Rockhold and Jacare. I don't know that he does, but he likes this, and history will reflect very well on it if he was to come out of retirement and win a world championship in a different weight class.
Well, this puts you in an interesting position. Currently, the middleweight champion is a man who you beat in Michael Bisping. If you return to MMA, would you be interested in pursuing the middleweight title and fighting Bisping, or even GSP potentially if he's the champion?
I wouldn't give a damn either way. Whoever the opponent is. I think only bullies pick their opponents. I think that, if you're going to be in that sport, and this is my own code, everybody lives by a code, but mine was anyone, anywhere, anytime. And if I was competing or back in my career, that was always the rule that I want to change. I do not care about the opponent.
So just to clarify, Tim Kennedy, you had some back and forth between yourself and him. He's another guy that you would potentially face if you were hypothetically to return as well?
Yeah. I mean, there wouldn't be anybody off the table. I'm not coming back. I don't think that it's a pro. You talk about living by a code. I also follow the rule. I'd say whatever I wanted about a guy, but I would always walk in there and let that guy answer for it if he had a problem with it. So, I'm not in that pool anymore. I'm not going to walk in there and answer for it. So I'm a little torn. But to answer your question in a hypothetical matter, yes, Tim, you could add Tim Kennedy to the list.
With all this craziness that with Conor McGregor rematching Diaz, with Lesnar coming back, you're not saying that a part of you sort of misses the action, considering you were the biggest draw in the game when you were around?
Yes, I miss it a lot. I miss it every day. I was a wrestler before MMA. I still think about college wrestling matches and high school wrestling matches, that keep me up at night, all the way back to kids wrestling. Yeah, you think about that stuff. Once it's in your blood, it's in your blood. I get jealous and envious, and I fantasize about it all the time, like I did before I was even in the UFC. But I don't think that's going to go away. I think that's just the way it goes. I talk to Randy Couture a lot. Same thing. He thinks about it too. And wish I would have done this different, or what would have happened if I tried this. There's just all these things that go through your head. But I think that's just the life, man. I don't think you ever come to terms with it.
Well, the good thing is, as a fan, obviously you'll be there covering UFC 200, so you'll be able to see it up close. But after the smoke from UFC 200 settles, fans can look forward to another major event in your new Submission Underground series, which is exclusive to Flow Combat, which, by the way, is a fantastic site. And this one features Jake Shields versus Benson Henderson. Actually, sorry, Chris Lytle is stepping in for Benson Henderson. King Mo versus Vinny Magalesh, and Kenny Florian and Jens Pulver also on the card. Tell us, Chael, what can fans expect from this show?
Yeah, look, it's a great event. It's live and free to any member of FlowCombat.com. It's 8-minute grappling matches with EBI rules. We've got some of the biggest names. We're going to find out who the best grappler alive is, and it's going to be a process. But everybody's welcome. It's not invite only. There's nothing keeping guys out. Anybody that thinks he's the best grappler alive, we will begin the process, and we will figure it out. We'll crown him champion.
You've been a part of Metamoris. What gave you the idea to do the show and partner with Flow Combat and, as you say, make grappling great again?
Yeah, I love Metamoris. I wish I was wrestling a Metamoris event this weekend. It was a great event. It was a lot of fun, and there's not a lot of opportunity for grapplers. And in this space, MMA fans trump grappling fans 10-1. But in participation, there's 10 times more people that grapple than that do MMA. I belong to a gym. We've got 100+ grapplers. We've only got 6 guys that are MMA fighters. So, they just need opportunity. They just need an opportunity to compete, and that's really all we're bringing. When you team up with Flow, you're bringing all the bells and whistles and videos and promotion, which can make things fun for the athletes. But at the end of the day, it's just somewhere to compete. If you either want to do it or you don't. And if you do, we've got a place. And if you don't, that's all right too.
It's going to be exciting. So, guys, make sure to check it out. Now, Chael, before we let you go, this just got confirmed just the other day. CM Punk is now officially going to be on UFC 203 against Mickey Gall. A quick prediction. How do you think his UFC debut goes now that it's official?
I'd like to see Punk do really well. I know this is a dream of his. He's worked really hard. He sacrificed. He dedicated. He put into it. I'd like to see him do really well. But I think the same thing can be said for his opponent. And those guys will go out and have their match, and we'll see if it happens. I'm not ready to sign off that I believe that that's going to happen, but I did read the article, and let's see if it does.
The part of you thinks it still might not happen, Chael.
Yeah, we'll see. There's a lot of moving parts there. There's a lot of moving parts. There's been opportunities before, and the match hasn't happened. Let's see. Let's just see if it does.
All right, Joe. Well, we cannot wait to see what happens. Guys, make sure to check out the exclusive live stream of Submission Underground, July 17th on Flow Combat. And for all the Aussie and New Zealand listeners, don't forget that is July 18th due to the time difference here. And make sure to check out Chael's podcast, You're Welcome, on Podcast One, as well as his excellent T-shirts at badguyinc.com. As always, Chael, pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for returning to the program.
Gentlemen, take care.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Joining us back on the show to break down some of the happenings from this week in MMA is the assistant editor from MMA Fighting, Marc Raimondi. Welcome back to Submission Radio, Marc. How's it going?
What's up, boys? How's it going?
Oh, it's going very well. Welcome to the show. We have to kick off with the biggest question of the interview. Derrick Rose going to the New York Knicks. Does this feel wrong? It feels wrong to me. It feels wrong to us. Is this a good move for both teams, in your opinion?
Man, I think the jury's still out, honestly. I really don't know how to feel about it. I mean, in terms of star power and potential, we know what Derrick Rose can do. We know that, we know that he can possibly be one of the best players in the NBA. But if that actually translates because of all the injuries he's had and how inconsistent he's been, I just don't know. I mean, I'm a Knicks fan. I'm a New York guy, so I'm cautiously optimistic. But they did give up a few players that I liked, so I'm not sure.
Aren't the New York Knicks the place where potential goes to die?
That is a very true statement. A very true statement, and that also extends to the Mets as well, the MLB team in New York that I'm a fan of as well.
All right, well, enough talking about NBA because, of course, this is an MMA show. Let's circle back to the UFC event in Ottawa last week. It was full of highlights, but one of the issues coming out of the show was some of the controversies surrounding some of the refereeing in the Letourneau-Calderwood fight. We saw you had an article on MMA Fighting looking further into the comments that Valerie made about her wardrobe malfunction. And, with more female MMA fights, do you think these malfunctions could be, a bit more of a problem in the future? And has Reebok had any reaction to this?
I reached out to Reebok yesterday and I got no response, which has kind of been the response that I've gotten in previous cases of these wardrobe malfunctions, which is to say nothing, zero. I've gotten nothing back from them, which is concerning because this is an important deal for the UFC. It's important for the fighters. If you can't have gear and if you can't have, they call it fight kits, whatever the hell you want to call it, if these things can't work properly and they're almost to the point where they're costing fighters fights, that's a massive problem. It's embarrassing for the UFC. It's potentially embarrassing for the fighters. I mean, Valerie Letourneau said that she had a very bad wardrobe malfunction on Saturday night, and to the point where she was her bra was almost coming off, and that just can't happen. This is a professional sport. It's supposed to be a serious real legitimate sport, and when uniforms are falling off of fighters, it just makes everyone look bad. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, no, it's serious. It's actually a pretty serious problem. So hopefully Reebok could do something to fix it. Definitely doesn't help their reputation in the community. You also wrote an article on an interesting same-day weigh-in regulations that are happening in Ohio for pro-amateur MMA events. Now, this is fascinating to us, but for those who haven't read your article, how exactly is this going to work, Marc?
So basically, right now, it's not going to be for all MMA. It's not going to be for any pro events. So the UFC will not be affected. Bellator will not be affected. But for events that have pro and amateurs on the same card, there will be same-day weigh-ins in Ohio. And the reason is I spoke to the head of the Ohio State Athletic Commission, Bernie Profato, last week, and basically what they want to encourage fighters to cut less weight. And pro fighters that are on pro-am cards, usually younger pro fighters who only have one or two fights experience in the pros, and they want to encourage those fighters to not cut a great deal of weight, which we know some fighters do. I understand the intention, but a lot of doctors will say that same-day weigh-ins are dangerous because fighters are going to cut weight, they're going to dehydrate themselves, and if it's the same day, they may go into the fight dehydrated, which is very dangerous for any number of reasons, as I'm sure you guys know. Reaction time isn't as good, motor skills are not as good, could make fighters more susceptible to concussions, to brain trauma. It's a very scary thing. So I understand the intent, and I agree with the intent because weight cutting is a huge problem in the sport. I don't think you're going to find many people who don't agree with that, but I'm not sure if the application of a same-day weigh-in is correct. A lot of people would say it's not.
Well, I mean, we're very interested to see how this actually plays out and whether it is, ends up being a good thing or not. Like you mentioned, there's certainly a lot of negatives. Let's jump to what's happening in the middleweight division right now. A lot of fans are talking about wanting to see a Bisping-Hendo rematch for the title. However, now GSP has come out of the woodwork and said on the MMA Hour that he wants to fight with Bisping too. Where do you stand on who Bisping should fight next?
I've continuously said that I think it should be Rockhold again. I know that I'm probably in the minority with this, but I feel like there was a lot of heat after that fight. Normally in a post-fight press conference, after everything is all said and done, there's a certain civility and there's a certain cordial relationship between the fighters who have competed. The post 199 press conference with Bisping and Rockhold was so contentious, and those guys obviously still have a lot of bad blood, and I still feel like there's a lot of unfinished business there. So immediately after the event, I was definitely in favor of doing that trilogy because now it's 1-1. Each has beaten the other. I think it makes sense. I think you need to strike while the iron is hot. But now there are some new possibilities opening up. Dan Henderson, who obviously doesn't quote unquote deserve the title shot because he has a bunch of losses recently and he hasn't worked his way up the rankings like other fighters have. I wouldn't be dead set against that because I think that a lot of fans want to see that. There's obviously a story there. There's a rivalry. Henderson knocked out Bisping in one of the best knockouts in UFC history. So there's a lot behind that would make it very cool and interesting. And then of course the GSP fight. If that's what GSP wants, you have to hear him out because he's one of the biggest stars ever. He's one of the biggest stars ever in UFC history. So you have to at least listen to him and discuss it. But I would prefer something else for GSP in his return because I think it would be weird if GSP comes back. What if he beats Michael Bisping? All of a sudden GSP is the middleweight champion, and then where does he go from there? Does he fight Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman? It just seems weird. I would prefer if GSP is going to come back. I'd rather him take super fights and fights that fans have wanted to see for a long time, like an Anderson Silva, something like that. So I do think there are a lot of directions the UFC can go, which is a good thing. I think there's a lot of good options here. Nothing necessarily bad. I think that any one of those things that we just discussed that would be fine. I think a lot of fans would want to see any one of those things.
You mentioned obviously GSP becoming champion would be pretty strange, and we agree with you. I mean, GSP versus Rockhold and some of these other bigger middleweights it doesn't seem like it would be the right thing to do. But let's talk about Hendo for a second as well. I mean, this guy's contemplating retirement right here. If he somehow does beat Bisping and decides to retire as champion, don't you think it sort of hurts the division and the UFC as well?
Well, I think that I don't know if it hurts the division. I think that for the moment, if it happened, that moment would be really cool because how many times has that really happened in the history of the sport? It would be a really memorable, historic event if that were to happen. So in that respect, from a nostalgia perspective, we're talking about a guy who's done a lot for the sport, a guy who's a legend of the sport. He's almost 46 years old. For him to win the belt, it would be cool, and it would be a great story. Obviously, I don't necessarily know if it would hurt the division. I think that there would certainly be a lot of question marks about what you would do next because if a guy wins the belt and then retires, you're like, well, what does this mean exactly? But I don't put too much stock in. Oh, it's gonna hurt the division. It's gonna hurt that. I really don't know what that means because at the end of the day, the division is really built on the draws and the stars in the division, and there's still gonna be even if Henderson wins the belt and retires, there will still be Luke Rockhold and waiting in the wings and a Michael Bisping and a Chris Weidman and if you go down even further at Jacare and a Yoel Romero, I think that division at the top is still very strong. It would be very weird and very different if Hendo were to win the belt and then retire, but it would be a fantastic story. I think that would be really a cool thing. By the way, I don't see that happening. I'm not sure if it would. I don't know for sure, but I do. If the fight happened, I would pick Michael Bisping.
Yeah, I mean, that will be something definitely worth watching to see Hendo win the belt and then retire. And I'm with you on that one that I wouldn't pick Hendo, but then again, I didn't pick Michael Bisping against Rockhold either, so you just never know. Crazy things have happened. Seeing as this is our final show before we fly up to Vegas, Marc, let's jump to UFC 200. Mark Hunt is the favorite over Brock Lesnar, but how do you see this fight playing out?
Wow, you know what? There are so many variables in this fight. I mean, I'm gonna take Marc Hunt. I'll say it off the bat because, and there's a lot of reasons because Brock Lesnar hasn't fought since 2011. So we don't know. I mean, people say that ring rust doesn't exist. It does exist. I don't know, but I mean, we're talking about a very very long period of time where a guy has not fought, and I think MMA is the kind of sport where things evolve very rapidly in this sport. I think that things change and fighters have gotten better, and I think that even in that 5-year or so span that Lesnar has fought, fighters have evolved and gotten better. So I think that for that reason alone, I lean toward Marc Hunt. And of course, Brock Lesnar has. There's no doubt who has the better stand-up. It's Marc Hunt. There's no doubt who has the better power. It's Marc Hunt. There's a lot of ways for Marc Hunt to win this fight because every fight starts standing. So there's going to be opportunities for him to land a big shot, and we know he can do that. And all he needs to do is land one, as we've seen in countless Marc Hunt fights over the years. That being said, you can never rule out a guy like Brock Lesnar, who is just an athletic, physical freak of nature, who very easily can dodge a punch, close the distance, take Marc Hunt down. And if that were to happen, the fight could be over relatively quickly too, because Marc Hunt off his back is not the most technical, the most proficient fighter either. So I lean Mark Hunt, but I like that fight a lot because there are so many different possibilities, and it's just a cool fight. It's just it doesn't really make any sense as far as rankings or whatever, but it's Brock Lesnar making a big return. Obviously, one of the biggest stars, one of the biggest draws in the UFC ever, against Mark Hunt, who's a fan favorite, who is the king of the walk-off knockout. So you have one of the best wrestlers against one of the best knockout artists. I mean, how can you not enjoy that matchup?
I mean, obviously, Josh Barnett was one of the names that was sort of circling around. We know that he was booked in with Arlovsky, but are you surprised that they didn't go with Josh Barnett and chose Hunt instead?
I'm not entirely surprised by that. I think that I know, like you said, Barnett was campaigning for that fight, and I think that would be really cool because both of them have that pro wrestling pedigree and that pro wrestling background. And I think the lead up to that fight would be really fun because Josh Barnett, when he gets into his pro wrestling mode, can be extremely entertaining, as we saw at the open workouts a few months ago. I think that would have been a great fight, but I have no problem with this fight. I think that Mark Hunt is I mean, the guy, there's just something about him. There's something about him that people really love, and Barnett has that as well. But there's just something cool about this fight, the striker versus the grappler, that wouldn't really happen in Lesnar versus Barnett. But if you would have told me Lesnar versus Barnett at UFC 200, I would have been probably just as excited.
I think it'd be hilarious to see Josh Barnett, if he had gotten that fight, to do some kind of intentionally cheesy promo trying to portray that Brock Lesnar was the one who attacked him at the open workouts. It was Brock all along. I'm coming back for my revenge. But if he has a good night and he does beat Mark Hunt, do you expect to see Lesnar fighting again, or do you believe it's just a one-time thing, Mark?
That's a good question. It seems like, from what WWE has said, that it's a one-off, that it's a one-time thing. Lesnar will be back in WWE in August in time for their SummerSlam event. But I don't know. I mean, if this happens one time, now there's precedent for it, so it could always happen again. I don't know if he signed a multi-fight contract with the UFC or if it was just for this one fight. I'd imagine that's just for this one fight because knowing Brock Lesnar, he'll want to come back and renegotiate and make even more money the next time if there is a next time. I think it really does depend on what happens in this fight. I think if he wins the fight, I would be almost surprised if he didn't come back and fight again against somebody because, look, I know Lesnar is a little bit older. He's 38, 39 years old, but so is the rest of the division. The division is still within his age range, and if he can beat a guy like Mark Hunt, he can beat almost anybody in the heavyweight division. So, why not? I think it would be cool.
And before we move on, I just got to mention, with the WWE and them saying, this is a one-off thing. Remember, I think it was WrestleMania 28 or 27, The Rock versus John Cena, and they were like, it's a once-in-a-lifetime event. And then the next year, they literally did the exact same main event. It was like, what?
That's
right. And I
right.
think the plan apparently was to do it 3 times in a row, so you never know with WWE.
Yeah, well,
Never know.
From what I understand about the WWE, they're going to wait and see how this impacts their SummerSlam ratings, and if it's a good
Sure.
thing, I'd expect to see him fight again. But let's talk about the placement of the fight, because DC and Jones, in a lot of ways, is being overshadowed by this fight. There's no doubt about the fact that this is the fight that will bring all the casual fans in. What's your reaction to the placement of the fight for this one, with Tate and Nunes and Aldo and Edgar being under the Lesnar and Hunt fight, and DC and Jones being the main event? Do you like this? Do you like how the card is set out? Do you like it being in the main event spot?
I actually love it, and I'll tell you why. Just from a pure, viewer perspective, I think that it's a really nice break. You go from Cain Velasquez versus Travis Browne, which is obviously a fight that has a lot of implications in the heavyweight division, to 2 incredibly important title fights in divisions that are getting a lot of buzz right now. Obviously, Aldo Edgar is an interim title fight, but I'm not sure if McGregor's ever going to come back to 145, so that might as well be the real title fight. So you have those 2 really important title fights, and then you have almost a little bit of a fun break in Lesnar versus Hunt, because it's not a meaningful fight. It's just a fun fight. It's just, what is going to happen? Let's see. There's no rankings importance. There's no title on the line. It's just it's a spectacle. And then you finish with the spectacle, and you get what could be the 2 top pound-for-pound fighters in the world fighting each other in Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. So I love the way that it's stacked up right now. I love the way that they've done it as Lesnar Hunt as the co-main. I think it makes a lot of sense because it gives fans that break. It goes from very serious and important fights to a fun, almost a little bit of a freak show, a little bit of a circus fight in Lesnar Hunt, and then you have the real deal. You have the biggest fight there is in terms of rankings, in terms of pound for pound, in terms of skill, and that's Jones against Daniel Cormier.
And let's be honest, with all due respect to Tate Nunes, Aldo, and Edgar, who, will most likely put on phenomenal fights, everybody's going to be tuning in because of this Lesnar-Hunt fight. That's the one that gets people excited. The only reason why you're going to put, the other guys above is because they're title fights. And to give another wrestling comparison, while we're doing these, while we're in the frame of, WrestleMania and all that, there was The Rock versus Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 18, and that was the big drawing, the match. It was below the heavyweight, championship fight. And they did say that was a huge mistake looking back on it because, let's be honest, that's the one that everybody tuned in for. You don't always need to go with tradition. But the last thing we got to talk to you about, Marc, is obviously this UFC sale. Right now, no one really knows what's going on. Everybody's looking for answers. UFC denying that it's done at the moment, but it's rumored to be a majority sale, and Dana White will stay on as president. If that's all true, how much of a change do you expect fans to see if it becomes official? Will it be business as usual, or do you think there might be some drastic changes?
That's a really good question, and I think that we may be too soon to actually answer that. Well, at MMAfighting.com, we have not been able to confirm the reports from Flow Combat that the UFC has been sold. We've been trying. Obviously, I think everyone has been trying. All we know now is that Flow Combat's reporting that it's pretty much a done deal, and the UFC is denying it. So I don't have any new information. I don't have any confirmation. I only have the same thing that you guys have read, and it's been difficult. No one's really talking about this. They're being very hush hush. There's not a lot of people leaking any news about this sale. I think that obviously Jeremy Botter, a friend of mine, I think he's a credible reporter. I think he's done a very good job with this the story. But I don't think anyone knows really what will happen. If and when the UFC gets sold. I'm not sure. I think right away it'll be business as usual. I think that everything in the next few months will kind of go on the way that we know that, the way that we understand how the UFC works and how everything goes. But then, as the new owners kind of get their lay of the land and see how things work, there could be tweaks here and there. There could be major changes. I think that it's too soon to tell because I don't think the new owners even know, because as you guys know, anytime you're doing something new and you're starting something different, you don't really know what's going to happen until you're actually in it and you're actually experiencing it every day and it becomes part of your life. So I don't even think, if WME IMG is buying the UFC, I don't even know if they know for sure what they're going to do differently, months and years down the line. I think they probably have some ideas and maybe they see some things they can do, but I don't think they'll actually know until they're actually living it every day. And I think there's still a lot that that may be decided still. I don't even know if they have a CEO in place. Some people have said Gary Cook may step in as CEO. Dana White still as president. I do think Dana White will stay on for sure. But I think there's still very much up in the air, and I think it's too early to say what will change and what won't.
Well, there you guys go. A lot of question marks in the air, but no doubt about the fact that Marc is going to be a busy man this July, as all of us will be. So make sure to check out his awesome work on MMAfighting.com. Again, some really great articles from Marc. Always great to check out his work and follow him on Twitter at Marc_Raimondi. You'll be missing out if you don't, and follow his awesome coverage. I expect you guys to have some great stuff coming out. Marc, thanks again for jumping on our final show before we head over to Vegas as well. And we're excited to see what happens next. So many question marks in the air.
Yeah, thank you guys, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. I'll see you out in Vegas.
All right, guys, there you go. Marc Raimondi of MMA Fighting. Always a pleasure having him on the show, and I'm sure we'll do something together in Vegas when we see him in a few short weeks. Now, we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but there's a few things to get through first. One is your fan questions, which, of course, you can send in at info@submissionradio.com. We'll be answering those. Some really good ones, actually. Before this, I want to take a second to talk about UFC 200, and more specifically, a few things such as this Lesnar and Marc Hunt fight. I mean, really, that's the main thing that everybody is talking about. Dennis, you've got a few thoughts. I want to hear them, man. Give them to me.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talking about this fight, but I really haven't heard it from this dynamic. And listen, this is something I've been thinking about in the shower and in bed. And I mean, this is a big fight. So this is something that I've been really contemplating because in the shower, that's where I get all my MMA questions in. I do a lot of thinking in the shower and in the toilet and all that kind of stuff. But
I do too.
You all know, in my conversations, I need a magazine rack in there. If I can live in the bathroom, I would. But one of the things that pop up to me about this matchup is just a couple of factors. The first one with Marc Hunt is conditioning. I don't feel like enough people are talking about the fact that conditioning will play a big part in this fight for Mark Hunt. Now, do we know he's in good shape going into this one? No one quite knows. We know he's been in good shape a few times, but there's a couple of factors there. Number one, it is pretty short notice, and we all know he likes to sort of let loose in between camps. And number two, is he motivated enough for this Lesnar fight? Because from the interviews I've listened to him with him, he actually doesn't seem that pumped up for this fight. To him, a title match or a fight with like an Overeem or a Stipe is a much bigger deal. So is he underestimating Lesnar going in here? And number three, another factor is, will he, I guess in a lot of ways, swallow his pride in this fight? A lot of people need to remember back to the fact that when it came to Verdum and Struve, he actually ended up on the ground with those guys. And I think a big part, from what I understand about Mark Hunt and from interviewing him, I think he always wants to prove that no matter where you take the fight, I'm not scared, I'll go anywhere. So he's known as a striker, but he's not afraid to go on the ground and mix it up with people. So I'm hoping that he keeps his ego in check in this fight, because maybe a part of him will be like, yeah, I'll stuff Lesnar's takedowns and I'll knock him out. But maybe a part of him will also be like, all right, let him take me down. I want to see what he can do. I want to prove everybody wrong. I want to show them that, hey, I can hang on the ground with Lesnar. I'm a good, well-rounded martial artist, and I've been here for a long time. So I think those are a couple of factors people aren't really talking about. When it comes to Lesnar, I'm very interested to see how long he's been training for this fight. Because obviously reports have come out he's been training for this fight for a while. But who has he been training with? I mean, we saw him getting his blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's obviously sold off his property in Minnesota where Death Clutch used to be. I believe that's sold in 2014. A lot of people still believe that's up there and that's where he trains. But he's not training there because that property is long gone. So where's he going to train and who's he training with? We've tried to reach out to his trainers, Marty Morgan, to come onto the show. He has been quiet and he has not agreed. So to me, that means obviously Morgan is back. Marty Morgan is back and training him. But who's back there? It's very difficult to understand. And with a limited amount of time, if it is 4 weeks or if it's longer, 8 weeks, let's say, that's not enough time to get used to striking and versing a guy like Mark Hunt. So who's he striking with? I mean, these are all big questions that sort of go through my mind. I just don't feel like they've been really brought up in a lot of these breakdowns, Cass. So I thought, hey, before we go to Vegas, I just wanted to bring them up for the fans and just sort of let it all out because it's been bugging me.
I think the game plan for Lesnar is very, very simple here. He needs to take Mark Hunt down. It's as simple as that. If he stands and bangs with Mark Hunt, he is going to get knocked out or at least TKO'd. Sure. We know Mark Hunt's got. We know Brock Lesnar. He doesn't react well to getting hit, but he has a phenomenal chin, and to this day he's never been knocked out cold. I think Mark Hunt is. If anyone can change that, I think definitely Mark Hunt is the guy. We know he took big shots from Shane Carwin, but I mean, as you get older, and with Mark Hunt's punching power, I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think timing is another one, Everybody gets ring rust, unless you're Dominic Cruz, but even the great GSP has spoken about how he had ring rust against Carlos Condit. Mark Hunt's not really the kind of guy that you want to shake off ring rust against, especially in the first few minutes, because in the first few minutes, you may end up getting knocked out. So I think it's pretty clear that Brock Lesnar's going to go in, and I think, was it Cain Velasquez where he literally just went straight for the takedown?
He just bum rushed.
Boom, straight in there.
Went for it. You could see it, yeah.
I think it's going to be the same thing. He may not go straight for a double leg. He may just want to go and push Mark Hunt against the fence, maybe slow him down a little bit, and then take him down off the cage. But if he's not able to do that, and you know what, that's probably the smartest way, because Mark Hunt in the open, he's pretty good at stuffing takedowns. His double leg defense is good. He's not good at chain wrestling, but just a straight double leg takedown. And Brock Lesnar, he's not really the chain wrestling kind of guy. He's really sort of like power double, take you down, bang. But if he can take Mark Hunt against the cage and work there, maybe slow the fight down a little bit, sap Mark Hunt a bit, who, by the way, I don't know that he needs that much conditioning, to be honest, because I'm with Jim Ross and I'm with a lot of people. I do think this fight's probably going to be over in the first round. I'm actually curious, if Mark Hunt does end up on bottom, I'm wondering how Brock Lesnar is going to look on top. His ground and pound, it is good, it's very destructive, but we've seen Mark Hunt take a lot of shots. I wonder if it would be enough, to finish the legendary Mark Hunt. I wonder if Lesnar will be able to test his chin in that sense on the ground, but I feel like
because you do think back to that Stipe fight in Adelaide, and even though he was absolutely in terrible conditioning, and he admitted this to us on the show, he had some issues. I mean, he took a lot of shots to the head, man, and he was on the bottom on that ground. And even though, he wasn't in great condition, he was still able to survive it. So I'm there with you as well. Even if Lesnar is able to get him down, unless he's able to figure out some kind of way to submit him, it's more than likely that he'll be able to take those shots. Unless, of course, a guy like Herb Dean, I'm not sure who's reffing this one, I'll have to double check, comes in if too many shots are he's taking too many shots back to back without protecting himself.
I feel like how is there not a special referee for this fight? How is someone like
Shane McMahon or something?
Shane
like
McMahon, Ric Flair comes in, referees this fight. Woo. Well, I mean, Brock Lesnar's ground and pound and Stipe's ground and pound, those are two very different things. I don't know if it's enough to knock Mark Hunt out though. I don't think he would knock Mark Hunt out. I think maybe he could get a TKO stoppage. Look, that fight, Stipe and Mark Hunt though, then again, you put that fight anywhere else, and if it wasn't, I don't want to target the referee, but most people agree that fight should have been stopped anyway. So in theory, Stipe Miocic should have a TKO victory over Mark Hunt right now. I think this fight is literally all X factors. What kind of shape is Mark Hunt in? How motivated is he? What kind of shape is Brock Lesnar in? What has he been doing these past few years? Things like speed. Is he still as fast as he was? That was a big factor. I think being such a freakishly athletic guy, I think a lot of those attributes have stayed. I think his strength has stayed. I think his power has stayed. I'm talking about Brock Lesnar. But if you're not practicing wrestling, day in, day out, and really, why would he be? Why would he be for the last 4 or 5 or so years? I don't know. His grappling, okay, he got his blue belt. But yeah, I don't know. This is literally all just X factors.
Here's my theory on it, and people can write and give me their opinion. But okay, number one, you don't think conditioning is important. To me, I think this is the most important factor for Mark Hunt, because if Lesnar is successful in getting him down in the first round and isn't able to finish him, he has to have the conditioning to be able to come out in the second and possibly even the third, after having to wear Lesnar's weight for the first and second rounds, possibly on top, and being able to come out there and still be able to be as sharp as he would be in the first round. And I think that could be a huge issue for him because if I'm Lesnar and I'm like, okay, Mark Hunt's super tough to finish, but I might go and try and finish him in that first round. But I know this. I've been pro wrestling, and people that know a bit more about pro wrestling might not know this, but that don't know much about pro might not know this. But to be in pro wrestling, you have to have a certain level of conditioning. Now, not the same as actual amateur wrestling conditioning, but because of all the number of bumps that you have to take, because of how much you have to move around in there, because there's so many high spots and big moves, it's still a very, 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 very high level of conditioning. So he does have some kind of conditioning. He has been wrestling. He has been doing a whole bunch of stuff. With Mark Hunt, there is a break there. So if I'm Lesnar, I'm going, okay, I do have some conditioning. I can put him down. I can grapple. I can stay on top of him for a couple of rounds. I can wear him down. If I can't finish him and I stay on top of him for those couple of rounds, at least in the third round, I'm hoping he can't come out and knock me out because he's too exhausted to do it. So this is why I think, to me, conditioning is the number one factor for Mark Hunt going into this fight.
Wow. Well, then I've never heard that said anywhere else.
Not many people have brought that up. That's why I wanted us to talk about it before we went over to Vegas. Because you and me, we'll be breaking this down in a bunch of different places. But I just want people to have a think about that. Conditioning. It's going to be super important, in my opinion, for Mark Hunt. And I've seen his body shape. He looks like he's in all right shape. But is he taking it seriously enough? And does he believe that in that position, it's super dangerous for him? Or does he think, look, I was on the ground with Verdum, I was on the ground with Struve, I can prove to people that it doesn't matter where you put me, I can get out and I can still knock you out. Because if that's how he's thinking, then that's a lot more dangerous than if he's thinking, okay, I've got to avoid that takedown. If I'm on the ground, I've got to get up straight away. If he's thinking like that, that's good. But if he's got ego involved here, if he's thinking, hey, he can put me wherever he wants, he still can't finish me, then that's going to be played definitely into Lesnar, in my opinion.
Brock Lesnar, right? He's got very good top control, but I wonder how his nerves are going to be on fight night, because we've seen when he first entered, it wasn't his first fight. We saw against, was it Frank Mir, Heath Herring, where he ran in with that massive flying knee, and we saw in his first few fights, he was so excited to just get in there and, start doing something. He wanted to destroy the guy in seconds. It took him a while to sort of relax, calm down, have a bit of patience. Even against Cain Velasquez, I mean, he tried to finish him. He got Cain Velasquez down, and if he wasn't in such a rush to pass, he may have held Cain down. I don't know if he would have won the fight or anything like that, but he would have potentially held him down for longer. But as soon as he tried to pass, Cain had those the butterflies, the underhooks, and he got Brock off. So that's the thing I'm wondering. And you mentioned, Mark Hunt and how he's been on the ground with those guys. Yeah, he's been on the ground with Struve. He's been on the ground with Verdum. But he was on top position. Bottom position, it's a different story. Mark Hunt, he's not really a threat off the bottom. He's decent at getting up. And that's the thing. In theory, if Brock Lesnar does take him down, he should be able to hold him down. But if Brock Lesnar's eager to pass and get into either mount, I think he would probably prefer to work from half guard. But if he is a little too eager, and if Mark Hunt can create scrambles and get back to his feet, I wonder what that would do to Brock Lesnar's confidence. And I wonder if that would create the opportunity for Mark Hunt to be upright and standing for long enough to, potentially knock out Brock Lesnar. I think either way, this fight is probably going to be looking like a car wreck. Either Mark Hunt is going to be destroying Brock Lesnar, I don't know, if there are any kind of scrambles, I think this is going to look like a dogfight. Kind of like Cain Velasquez, where people compared it almost to like a back alley brawl. It was just such a wild fight. Brock Lesnar, what was that famous line in the commentary? Brock Lesnar spinning out of control, and all the memes of Brock Lesnar breakdancing. I think it's going to be one of those crazy fights. Let me ask you this, though. When we were talking about this with Jeremy Botter, we laughed at the notion of Brock Lesnar versus Mark Hunt. We called it a stupid fight, saying Mark Hunt would just destroy Brock Lesnar. But now here we are. The fight's official. It's a few weeks away. What is your official prediction? If you have one, if you can actually make one for this fight, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I just can't. It's very difficult because I got two frames of mind. Number one is Mark Hunt's going to knock out Lesnar in the first round. Mm-hmm. But if his ego gets to him, if he lets Lesnar get him down in the first and then wear him out, if his conditioning's not there, I see Lesnar beating him in the second round. Here's the thing I'm thinking about. Lesnar has gotten his blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And a lot of people are like, well, who gives a fuck? It's a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like, for people have been in jiu-jitsu their entire lives, they're like, yeah, all right, we roll with the blue belt every night. Sometimes we submit him, sometimes we don't. Not a big deal. But here's the thing. Combining Lesnar's deadly wrestling or his wrestling ability with being able to control positioning like a blue belt, now we're looking at something that's a lot more dangerous. People don't realize the big difference between a white belt and a blue belt in a lot of cases is, and this is because you learn this from the beginning, this is one of the things that you perfect, is how you're going to be in that half guard the right way. How do you transition to mount? Blue belts, that's one of the biggest improvements that they make. They don't make huge improvements on submissions. That all comes sort of down the track. They can do some basic stuff. They can do arm bars, omoplatas, triangles. They can do those fairly well, but it's learning more about positioning. So, like you mentioned, Casper, he's not that great at top control. He's been okay, but now they're going to see him with some skill. Yeah, talking about Lesnar.
Oh, Lesnar's got great top control. Phenomenal top control.
Well, he's got okay top control. I don't think he's got great top control. I mean, I think it was quite basic. And I think now he's going to come in with the added skills of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt. And the biggest skills I think he's taken out of that is better position control. So before he had pretty good position control but he stunned people. But here, look out for a Lesnar that can move from half guard to mount a lot easier, who can shift his body weight even better. And I think that is what may give him that win in the second round over Mark Hunt. But if I have to be honest, I mean, this is the longest prediction of my life, but if I have to be honest, still Mark Hunt in the first round KO, if he takes this thing seriously, is what's going to happen. What about you, Cass?
I'm very curious to see what kind of Brock Lesnar we see mentally, because before the Overeem fight, we've always seen Brock Lesnar as confident. Yeah. Before the Overeem, he spoke like there wasn't a single chance Overeem would beat him, and he's been like that before any one of his fights, against Carwin, against Cain Velasquez. And I just wonder what he's going to be thinking when he goes down in front of that crowd and he knows that he's about to fight Mark Hunt. I know people say, look, he's been in pro wrestling, he's used to big crowds. I'm not saying it's going to be the crowd that's going to be daunting him. It's just the reminder that I wonder if it's going to be almost like a traumatic experience for him, that the last time he was here, he got beaten by Alistair Overeem. And then the time before that, Cain Velasquez. I just wonder what it's going to be like when the cage door closes and he walks in there. You can be phenomenal in training, but as they say, the mental side is such a big thing. And I just wonder what he's going to be like after 4.5 years. And then there's the physical factor. Is this I'm not saying that this will be the technically best Lesnar that we'll ever see, but is this going to be the physically, the best version, the healthiest version of Brock Lesnar that we're going to see? It is all about the X factors. But I will say this, I'm going to say Mark Hunt, first round. It's the easy prediction. I don't think I'm shocking anyone there, but I would not be surprised by anything that happens in this fight. I mean, if Brock Lesnar can't get it to the ground, he's getting knocked out. It's as simple as that. But Mark Hunt, losing in a 3-round decision because Lesnar's on top of him, it wouldn't surprise me. It's not the craziest thing. Brock Lesnar finishing Mark Hunt in the first round or the second, like you said, it wouldn't surprise me either. Nothing would surprise me. But yeah, my official prediction, first round KO, Mark Hunt, Super Samoan, and everybody's drinking coconuts and celebrating.
One of the final things I want to bring up here is you mentioned this, and this is important, confidence and how he's going and mentally. Now, his fight with Shane Carwin, I believe he was already struggling with diverticulitis, Casper, around that time.
Yeah.
So if you look back at his fights against Frank Mir, Randy Couture, Heath Herring, he was a lot more confident. And even though he did take some shots from Frank Mir in that second fight that you'd think could have been avoided, he just seemed to take them a lot better. So when you have a very bad illness like diverticulitis, you lose a lot of confidence in what you can do because you've seen how debilitating it's been. And that Shane Carwin fight was very close to, I believe, when he thought he beat it the first time or something like that. Here, he's been wrestling in the WWE for a while. He's been putting in really good performances. Physically, he's looked amazing. So I'm thinking that that's going to actually help him deal with punches, because when you're wondering if whether or not you're going to be able to perform in an octagon, somebody throws punches your way, you're worried about a whole bunch of different factors. You've lost confidence across a variety of things coming into that fight. So there, you start to freak out even more. If you go in, though, you're fully healthy. You don't have to worry about if your body is going to be able to perform or not. You'll be able to focus more on reacting to those punches, taking those punches. So I'm wondering if, because obviously Shane Carwin, Cain Velasquez, and Alistair Overeem went, Shane Carwin he beat, but still he didn't react that well to punches in those fights. I'm wondering if in this fight, because he's healthy and has a lot more confidence in his body, it'll help him deal with moving around, more head movement, and reacting to punches better. I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, these are all valid points. I mean, I think that unless he's sparring and he's just going through the motions and taking, not beatings in training, but just getting used to it, I don't think anything else would really help him in terms of head movement. The other thing is, look, he may have improved his reaction to getting hit. I just don't think that physically him or really many people in this world would be able to handle getting hit by Mark Hunt. Not even from a reaction standpoint. If you're knocked out cold, you won't be able to react to anything. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, that's the thing, though. If he's able to set up these shots with some punches without freaking out about being hit by Mark Hunt or reacting to the punches that Mark Hunt throws to set up his shots a bit better, then he might have a better shot of taking Mark Hunt down and getting him to a fence. But if he runs out and he just bull rushes him up to the cage, well, that's a lot more predictable. And obviously, Mark Hunt might have more of an opportunity to, time that and knock him out, use that to his advantage. So I'm just very curious. So many X factors, like you mentioned, but I mean, if you watch Mark Hunt footage and you see some of those past knockouts, that has to have some kind of mental effect on you, right? Like some of the stuff that he's been able to do, some of those walkaway knockouts, you watch that and knowing what's happened to you in the octagon before, I mean, it would be hard to imagine that he doesn't think about that and it doesn't affect him, but who knows? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fight's happening. It's just, a couple of weeks away. I can't wait to jump on that plane and get to Vegas already. We're going to be doing some exciting stuff, some vlogs. There is going to be a plethora of content on the channel, but it's interesting that this is the main fight that we're talking about, and yet there's other fights like Nunes Tate, Aldo, Edgar. We got Marc's thoughts, Marc Raimondi's thoughts, but I just want to get your thoughts quickly on the placement of this fight. Are you okay with it? Are you offended that it's above two other title fights? What do you think?
Yeah, there's been a few people talking about how it's a bit demeaning to Miesha Tate. Look, usually I'd look at this and I might evaluate it differently, but this is UFC 200. I think it absolutely makes sense that it's co-main event. A lot of people are going, okay, if it's over Miesha Tate and it's over Aldo, why isn't it over DC and Jones? The reason why this thing isn't the main event is because I don't think these guys would be able to go 5 rounds on a month's preparation. I'm not sure how long they've been preparing, but 5 rounds is a big ask. And if you're signing Brock Lesnar to the UFC and you go, oh, and by the way, not only are you fighting Mark Hunt, but it's going to be 5 rounds, that's a bit tougher to prepare for. So this thing is a co-main event. I think it absolutely makes sense. If you had it, let's say before, and you've brought this up, Cass, beautifully with WrestleMania X8. If you had it before Miesha Tate and you had it before the Aldo Edgar fight, a lot of people would sort of tune out after that because they come to their peak of excitement in that fight. And then afterwards, you know, those fights, especially the Aldo Edgar fight, you got to be sharp for that fight. There's a lot to watch for. You know, there's going to be a lot of great excitement, but it would be tough to tune back in after the crazy excitement of that. So I think that it's perfect placement. I think the UFC have done a great job. And I don't think people should be offended at all. This card is a casual fans card. Even though it's got great matchups through and through for all the hardcore MMA fans, this card is for everybody. So I think that it's a great spot for it. What about you, Cass? Obviously, you mentioned you agreed with it, but do you have any other thoughts on the placement? Would you put it anywhere else?
No, look, it's all a business move that I have no issue with. Brock Lesnar is the bigger draw than Miesha Tate. Plain and simple. That's it. Why would you bury such a big draw on the undercard for the sake of tradition? And it's like I said, WrestleMania X8, Rock and Hulk Hogan, two icons. You don't have to be a wrestling fan to know who Hulk Hogan is. You don't have to be a wrestling fan to know who The Rock is. And when those guys faced off in a pro wrestling match, it was massive. Do you remember Triple H versus Chris Jericho? Do you know who those guys are? If you're not a pro wrestling fan, you probably don't, and you probably don't care. They were the main event above Rock and Hulk Hogan. The poster for that event is Rock and Hulk Hogan. Why were they not a main event? Because of tradition. Because the title match, fight, whatever you want to call it, always gets the top bill. And later on, they look back on it, and the person who made that decision said it was a mistake, and we regret it. And I think it'll be the same thing here. It's not at all disrespectful to Miesha Tate or Aldo or Edgar or Amanda Nunes. It is just what makes sense for business. I mean, the co-main event and the main event, they're the two fights that get the most coverage by the media, and because they're the top two. And if you're going to give more coverage to Miesha Tate than to, say, Brock Lesnar, it would be a huge mistake because obviously one has more fans than the other. So I have zero issue whatsoever with the placement of Mark Hunt and Brock Lesnar. And I will say, I'm so happy this fight's on the card, not only from a fan's perspective, but I keep thinking back to Dana White saying, by the time this card is done, people will be blown away, or people's minds will be blown. One of them. And I remember we had this discussion a month ago, or a couple of months ago, you and me, Dennis, and we said, yeah, it's not really a mind-blowing card. Like, it's a great card. It's a stack card, but you don't have that big fuck-off fight. Where's GSP versus Anderson Silva? Where's that once-in-a-lifetime fight? Now, with Lesnar and Hunt, I feel like we have that crazy, what the hell is this kind of matchup? So I love it. Mind blown. I'm blown away.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, this is bigger than McGregor versus Diaz. This is the once-in-a-lifetime attraction fight. And also, just on the final thing on that is, this is great for Miesha Tate because people are going to be tuned into the card that might not usually watch her fight, or Aldo and Edgar. They'll be tuned into the fight to watch Lesnar. If you put Lesnar before them, they might tune out before those guys got to fight. So they'll have to stay tuned, and they'll see those guys fight, and they'll get some new fans. So all in all, it all works out.
And you know who else wins? DC and John Jones, because these guys get pay-per-view points, right? How happy are you? All right, you're DC and John Jones, you're main eventing, it's 200, there's going to be a lot of promotion, so you're thinking, all right, we're going to get a good payoff, we're going to get a portion of the pay-per-view sales. You got Brock Lesnar injected on the card, you know you're going to be getting a lot more money. Same reason why Tito Ortiz, for example, he had it in his contract, I believe, that he was going to get pay-per-view points from way back in the day, so even if he wasn't main eventing, he'd get them, and he strategically placed himself on the Brock Lesnar card, UFC 121, him versus Cain Velasquez, and the Chael Sonnen versus Anderson Silva 2 card, UFC 148, specifically to make those pay-per-view points. I can't imagine how happy DC and John Jones would be right about now. These guys are going to get massive, massive payoffs. I don't know if it's the same for Miesha Tate. I don't think it would be for Amanda Nunes. I think just because she's fighting for a title, I don't think that guarantees her pay-per-view points. I don't know, maybe. I mean, Miesha Tate, I believe she has signed a new contract, within the last, since winning the title. I hope for her sake she does get pay-per-view points, because if that's the case, I guarantee you she's not complaining that, she's below Brock Lesnar. In fact, that would be the best thing for her, to have Brock Lesnar above her on the billing. Yeah, for sure. And DC's a huge pro wrestling fan, so couldn't be any other person, any better person to be there on the card. So there you guys go. It's going to be some exciting stuff. But Cass, should we jump into these fan questions? We've got a bunch of fun ones. Yeah, we're going to quickly bang out these fan questions. There's a few that we want to sort of get into and discuss. All right, let's read them out. Jason Grech, Grech, I think I'm pronouncing that right. You dudes are legends. Love the show. Keep up the epic work. Thank you. No question there. Simon O'Keefe makes another return to the question segment. Who would win a fight between Don Frye's mustache and Mel Gibson's mullet from Lethal Weapon? Dennis, what do you think?
This is tough. And let's not forget, Mel Gibson does throw up an incorrect triangle in one of the Lethal Weapon movies. Doesn't put the arm in, but he tried.
If his mullet did that against Don Frye's mustache, what do you think is going to happen?
I think the mustache wins. Look, we love mullets because it's business in the front, party in the back.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel like, look, let's be honest here. The mullet's dead. It's not around anymore. You don't really see it anymore. You might see it here in Australia. Here at the Australian Football League, you got a few guys that have to have a bit of a laugh and have it. But people still have cool mustaches, man. Don Frye looks better than ever. So for me, the mustache beats the mullet when it comes to fashion. And I think it's because it's skinny. It just flies through the mullet, knocks it out. And much like Don Frye, enjoys the drink. Let's not forget, the mullet doesn't drink alcohol. You don't drink from the back of your head. You drink through your lips. So, that mullet's always intoxicated, always has good nutrition. And some ladies seem to like it. I don't think that many ladies like mullets. So there you go. Wins and all fronts. What about you, Cass?
Yeah, I see the fight going down like this. Mel Gibson's mullet throws up an incorrect triangle. Don Frye's mustache says something like, all right, sissies, let's do this. Picks up the mullet, smashes him down, and that's the end of the fight. You can't mess with Don Frye's mullet. It is the single greatest piece of hair. It beats Samson's hair from the Samson and Delilah days. It beats any other hair, be it wigs, toupees, hairstyles, merkins, pubes, everything. There is just no comparison to Don Frye's mustache. Yeah, this is an easy one.
Yeah. If this was like Will Smith's mustache, I don't know if you people remember back in the day, had like a bit of a pencily one. Yeah, Mel Gibson's mullet would beat that.
Yeah, the real fight here. It's because I don't have anything against Mel Gibson's mullet. Don Frye's mustache versus Donald Trump's hair. That's the fight that I want to see.
Jeez,
and Don Frye's mustache would reign supreme. Yeah. Well, then again,
the thing is that the hair would build a wall around the mustache. You see,
I feel like
stopping it from getting the much needed nutrition it needs to stay, relevant and beautiful.
Yeah, that's true. It'd deprive it of sunlight, like some kind of Superman kryptonite thing where Superman needs the sun. I feel like Donald Trump's hair, though, you don't really know what's in it. Like, is it actual hair? Is it made out of adamantium like Wolverine's claws? Is it indestructible? Like, is it some kind of particle from space that not many people are really aware of? I feel like it'd be like the evil Terminator in Terminator 2, like liquid nitrogen, You hit Donald Trump's hair and then it just comes back and you got to melt it down or something.
Well, the thing with that's right. Well, the thing with Donald Trump is I'm 99% sure he's one of the aliens from Men in Black.
Right.
He looks exactly like one of the ones that looks like a human being and dresses up in the skin.
The Bolchinian,
acts like one. And now that's right. Yeah, now he's trying to take over the world. So, yeah, I'm not sure. USADA need to test that dude.
Yeah, he drinks sugar
being
water.
An alien.
Yeah.
Sugar water. Yeah.
All right, next question is from Jody. I love Jody, by the way. She's a super dedicated fan. Tweets us all the time, comments all the time, listens to the show while she has her coffee in the morning. A lot of love for Jody. She asks, who are your favorite women UFC fighters and why? Also boxers or briefs. Lol. Dennis, what's your answer? Favorite female fighters?
That's a good one. Look, I love Miesha Tate. I love Ronda Rousey. I think I have love for most of the fighters. Juliana Pena, I'm always interested to see what she's doing. You know who else I love? I love Leslie Smith. She likes to brawl and she has a lot of heart, but she's also such a nice person. And I saw she's doing stand up with Adam Hunter. And that's like good for you, Leslie. I hope that takes off. You have a great personality, and I think you're really, really entertaining. So now those would have to be some of my favorites. What about you, Cass?
I love Jessica Penne. I can't get enough of Jessica Penne. I think she has super exciting fights, especially once the fights hit to the ground. It's a lot of scrambles, a lot of excitement. Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I mean, I'm Polish. It would be sacrilege if I said anything else. I mean, she goes in there and just destroys people. She disfigures faces. I love watching her fight. Claudia Gadelha, phenomenally well-rounded, and I don't know, man. I wouldn't be surprised if she, beat Joanna. She is one of the best female fighters out there. Raquel Pennington, I love her style. Super exciting. Loves to brawl. Chris Cyborg, how do you not love Chris Cyborg? Paige Van Zandt, I spoke about it on the show. I didn't think much of Paige Van Zandt's first couple of fights, but that fight against Rose Namajunas, man, I gained a lot of respect, a ton of respect for Paige Van Zandt. Rose Namajunas herself as well. She's another super exciting fighter. Miesha Tate, you know, she has had some less than stellar or exciting fights, but she's ridiculously tough, very, very difficult to finish, and yeah, I love that about her. And I love Amanda Nunes as well. I mean, she's got that kill or be killed mentality. Again, not the most exciting fight in her last outing against Shevchenko, but pretty much all her other fights. I think she's got some ridiculous fight finishing rate where I was looking at her record recently, and like almost none of her fights have ever gone to a decision. So yeah, I love Amanda Nunes. Next question, Mark Fellas, and here's an interesting one that we want to sort of discuss a bit.
Whoa! We didn't answer the boxes of briefs.
Which
was the most important part. And I feel sacrilegious if I don't say Gina Carano. She's great. I was a big fan of hers. Obviously, she's a very good actor. And Holly Holm's fun to watch as well. Let's talk about these briefs for a second. Well, first of all, do you wear briefs, Casper?
Well, I was going to say, how does Jody mean this question? Boxes or briefs? She talking about us? She talking about the female fighters? Because I will say I like those.
Yeah, you go.
I was going to say, I think she's talking about, I don't know. If we're talking about female fighters, because I want to answer this correctly, I like the little shorts. They don't have to be tight, the ones that Miesha Tate rocks.
You want to make sure you get this right. You want to make sure you're on record saying the right thing.
I have to. Yeah, I have to. For Jody. Not for me, not for you. It's for Jody. So I'm just putting it out there. But what were you going to say? This is what we wear, right?
Okay, well, yeah, I thought it was what we wear. I have to talk
it probably is.
Very seriously to all our listeners right now.
Mm-hmm.
The briefs. Are we talking about like the old man briefs, the ones that are like cut off and tight? And
no, those are tidy whities, and I don't think they deserve to be called briefs. That's
no. I gotta say something, man. If you're listening right now, get rid of it. Just do it. I mean, it's not happening anymore. It's over. Nobody likes the briefs. When you take your pants down in the pool, they are laughing at you. And also, if you go to the pool, don't wear Speedos either, unless you're Ian Thorpe or a competitive swimmer or something like that, going for a gold medal. Just wear some normal swimming shorts, man. We don't need to see that stuff. But yeah, I am a normal briefs guy. So the ones that go down, are they? I don't know if they're called briefs. Are they called briefs? The ones
that's what they call them. Yeah,
I love those ones. I love the ones that are made out of that nice, soft fiber. I love wearing them after a hard gym session. I have this. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I have this obsession with new underwear and new socks. Like I love getting new underwear and new socks. And then when I'm done showering and I'm done doing my thing and I'm all clean and ready to go, I love slipping it on and feeling it all new for the first time. Afterwards, they're destroyed and never the same again. If I had money, that's the one thing I would always buy that's new. Socks and underwear. I know there's rappers and they like throw out Jordans after wearing them once. I would just throw underwear. I don't have that luxury. So there's been some underwear that's been through a few battles. But that's one of my favorites. And boxers are okay. I used to wear them in high school, but a bit too much freedom for me.
Yeah, I don't like the freedom. I
too much bounce.
There's no control there. You never know what's going on there. It's like anything can happen. It's like the Lesnar Marc Hunt fight. You don't know what's going to happen. It's a bit unpredictable. I haven't worn.
Like the Lesnar Hunt fight.
Yeah,
I might get taken down. Someone might get knocked out.
Yeah, exactly. I was on the cutting edge. I was on the forefront of this briefs movement years and years and years ago. I have not worn I hate boxer shorts. I hate them. Always have. The silk ones, the cotton ones. I don't like any of them, and I haven't worn them since about year 5, year 4 maybe in primary school. That was like, I don't know, 2099. We're talking a long time ago when I was like 10 years old. I'm 26 now, and I've been on the briefs for many, many, many years. I'm like you.
16 years.
Huh?
16 years of briefs.
16 years. When is the UFC going to do a special on that? In 4 years, 20th anniversary, 20th brief anniversary. These are the important things.
That's at least the Fight Pass show.
Oh,
the brief show.
We'll get Roman Mazarov commentating. Briefs. What is going on with these briefs? I have no idea.
People love Roman. Have you noticed that? I've noticed that on the internet. Like, there's been a lot of people that support Roman, and they're like, he adds excitement and entertainment to shows. What's wrong with you guys? Why do you hate on him? We love this guy.
I don't hate on Roman. He was a hilarious part of the thing. I don't think he's the greatest commentator. I think there's a lot of times where he didn't really know what was happening. I mean, you can't compare him to say like a Joe Rogan or plenty of other good commentators. But I mean, he was fun. He was super fun. I'm not opposed to listening to him during more broadcasts. But yeah, just quickly with this briefs thing, briefs all the way. And much like you, Dennis, I do have that slight obsession with buying way, way more underwear than I know what to do with. But I also have a really bad habit. I've got a lot of nice underwear, but I have a bad habit of wearing underwear for way, way, way too long. I mean, it looks like it's been through some things. There are just holes. Some of it is like hanging on by like one single thread. I don't know why. I'm like, look, I'll give this underwear a chance. I feel bad. Breaks my heart to throw it out, and yeah, I keep it just for like around the house wearing. It doesn't really do its job, but I can't bear to throw it away.
Yeah, I have like an emotional connection to my underwear. Like, look, kid, it's almost like a fighter that's retired, no longer in the UFC. You don't want to just throw it to the wayside. You look at it, you go, look, kid, we've been through some good times together. You were there, for the summer of '86. So you keep them around, but I have to keep mine, very silently. Like, if an army comes to take away your family, I've got it like hidden in the basement. I've got it like a little compartment because my girlfriend always tries to throw them out, like a silent assassin. So. Yeah, for sure. It's a serious situation, guys. Make sure you wear the right thing down there. Obviously, there's a lot of free bowlers as well. I can't do that. I don't like it, but I know a lot of people like to do it.
I do that regularly. If I haven't done washing and I'm out of underwear, I'm like, well, nobody will know.
Never roll with no underwear on. There's a few guys in the gym that have free bowled in their shorts. That's not good when you get north-south. Well,
I know you got a mean north-south.
I just say I've got a few injuries and they don't want to let me back in the gym, but we'll leave it at that. And when it comes to Romanov, I know I'm coming back around to it. We don't hate Romanov. I reckon he's got his place in places like the EFN, but definitely he's not a UFC caliber commentator. Anyway, moving on.
I hope that answers your question, Jody. All right, Mark Fellows has got a really good question. Since Michael Bisping won the title, he has started campaigning for a fight against Dan Henderson. We all love Hendo, but if he deserves a title shot, I'll donate my next beer to charity. Can it be the Submission Radio charity? I didn't hear Bisping calling Hendo out prior to UFC 199. Therefore, this appears to be a clever marketing on Bisping's part in order to avoid the legitimate threats as Jacare, Rockhold, Romero, and Weidman. Personally, I would be disappointed to see Hendo gifted a title shot ahead of the more deserving contenders. Thoughts? Dennis, we'll go with yours first.
Agree with you. Bisping's pretty smart. He only calls out people that he wants to fight. And I always felt like he never really wanted to fight Robert Whittaker. And I think a part of him always wanted to avoid that fight because it was sort of, not that many people knew Whittaker and he knew there was a lot on the line. So he's definitely doing that here with Henderson or GSP. There's two parts of me here. A part of me thinks it's just ridiculous to see Hendo just jump over everybody and get the title shot. And also, to me, I actually think it's a bad thing if he retires after he becomes champion because you got this guy who just beat your champion. He's gone now. And now you got to figure out some kind of tournament to win the title. And what if Bisping wins it again? Everybody will be like, yeah, he's champion, but Dan Henderson's the real champion, blah, 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 loss of legitimacy. But then a part of me really wants to see this rematch because I'm really interested in seeing the Hendo take on Bisping again. And the first one was so good. So I'm divided on this. If it happens, I'll be super excited to watch it. If it doesn't, I'll totally understand why Dana didn't make it happen. And I know he was on that the new Matt Serra podcast the other day, and he said that they'll have to wait and see what happens. And it's hard to get Henderson to jump over that many fighters, but it's possible. From what he said, it doesn't seem that likely, but you can't put it past the UFC. I mean, the fans really want to see this fight, and the UFC does put together fights that fans want to see. So I wouldn't be upset. But I would understand if they didn't go ahead with it. What about you, Cass?
Yeah, I think the fight would draw, and I think if they do it, it'll be a combination. And that's a big if. I don't think they will. But if they do it, it'll be a combination of the fact that it would draw, and it would be a bit of a favor to Michael Bisping that, look, he's been a company guy, he's been around for so long, and this is the fight that he wants. I don't think he's scared to fight anybody in the division, Michael Bisping. There's one thing about him. He's never been short on confidence. I don't think he's scared to fight Luke Rockhold. I don't think he's scared to fight Jacare or Romero or Weidman. I don't think he's ducking anybody. I think he's always wanted this Henderson fight. And, Mark, you say he didn't campaign before UFC 199. I mean, why would you? You've got Luke Rockhold in front of you. You don't know if you're going to beat him. You don't know how that fight's going to play out. And I think this is the fight that Bisping has always wanted. He said as much. It's a haunting loss. I mean, this is one of the best highlights in UFC history Henderson knocking out Bisping, I completely understand why he'd want to have this fight again. Now, if Henderson was going to stick around for another 5 to 10 years, then I would think, well, why now? But because Henderson is probably going to retire, he may not fight again. He may fight one more time. I definitely don't see him signing a long-term contract unless it's like just the perfect ideal terms. Henderson might be doing, if he even signs a contract, it may just be a one-fight contract. And I think Michael Bisping wants to avenge that loss before Dan Henderson retires for good, and then he'll never, ever get that chance to, avenge that loss. So I don't blame him, and I think the fact is he's never had the leverage to ask for that rematch. He's never been a champion. He's just, kind of been stuck in this gatekeeper, beating the next guy and the next guy. And if he didn't get this title shot against Luke Rockhold, he probably would have had just another fight, and who knows if he even would have gotten a title shot afterwards. Now that he's got the title, he's not exactly calling the shots, but he has a little bit of power. So I can understand why Bisping would say, look, Dan Henderson's the guy that I want. And you got to look at it in another way. Look, if he fights Rockhold again, that's a money fight. Bisping will make money, right? We talked about pay-per-view points. If you're in the main event, you are getting a share of the pay-per-view if it's in your contract. I'd say Bisping's got that. If he fights Rockhold, he'll make money. If he fights Weidman in New York, in Madison Square Garden, he will get money. If he fights Jacare, he's not going to make that much money. Jacare's not a trash talker, and that's what, Bisping gave Rockhold a lot of shit during the press conference, saying you ducked Jacare, and Rockhold said, look, the alligator has short arms, and he doesn't speak English, and et cetera, et cetera. What Rockhold was trying to say is, I picked you because you're a bigger money matchup. I want to fight you in the main event because I'll get more money through pay-per-view. Of course, you can't say that in a press conference because it compromises, the sort of legitimacy of the fight. So, yeah, I don't have any issue with doing that. The whole GSP matchup, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. But I'll tell you what, Bisping would be stupid to take a Dan Henderson fight instead of a GSP fight because if we're talking pay-per-view points, if we're talking money and building that nest egg in order to retire, because Bisping's probably not going to be around for too much longer, GSP is the fight that you want. If GSP is calling you out, you say thank you, you accept, and then you sell the shit out of that fight because everybody is going to tune into GSP's return. So if I'm Michael Bisping, I'm hoping it's GSP. If it's not GSP, then really whoever he wants. But yeah, to answer your question, Marc, I don't think he's scared to fight anyone, and I don't think he's avoiding those legitimate threats. I think if he fights Hendo, he knows he's going to be fighting those guys next anyway. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
And to me, I would rather see him fight GSP than Dan Henderson. And to me, if it's not GSP, I guess I am hoping it's Dan Henderson, and if it's not Dan Henderson, I think I'd rather see him versus Rockhold again than Weidman because they got a bit of thing going on. It's pretty interesting. They got a bit of back and forth, and if it's not Rockhold, I guess I'd go with Weidman. And yeah, Jacare is just last for me. I'd love to see that fight. I just think in terms of interest and what they can do with Bisping, in a lot of ways it could be a bit criminal for the UFC to go that way. I don't think they go that way. And I feel bad for Jacare because he'll have to wait sort of on the sidelines, but I think he's got an injury that he's recovering from anyway, so that might all work out. Interesting to see what happens.
Well, it's funny because the order of guys who deserve the fight as opposed to the guys that will most likely get it or would draw is completely different. Like, I think Jacare deserves it the most. I don't think you can argue that. Rockhold just lost. Weidman just lost. Romero's in limbo. Dan Henderson is, ranked 13th. GSP's been on the shelf for ages. I think Jacare clearly deserves it more. But yeah, from a business perspective, you're going to make more money with Rockhold or Weidman or Hendo or GSP. How bad would you feel if you're Jacare? You're probably going to get screwed royally out of a title shot again. I don't know. I still like Bisping versus Weidman at Madison Square Garden, UFC 205. If that fight lines up, I like it. And just to clarify, after UFC 199, we spoke to Jeremy Barter, we were so against, another rematch. But we didn't see the press conference. Once we watched the press conference and saw the back and forth, I'm all in. I don't mind. I don't mind seeing a rematch. And it's one of those strike while the iron is hot. I don't mind if they do an immediate rematch. I think everybody will be on board for that.
Yeah, I'm still not that sold on the rematch, but I guess it'll be a bit more interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Bisping. I still hope maybe it's Hendo or GSP because that would be really cool to see before Bisping pulls out. The only problem with GSP is if he becomes middleweight champion, now that's a conundrum because he's got to fight guys like Rockhold, he's got to fight guys like Weidman. And that's an interesting situation as well because for a long time, GSP was talking about how he was afraid to fight Anderson Silva because he didn't want to move up in weight. There's a lot of issues moving up in weight. And he goes moving up to middleweight with guys that are really pretty big and pretty strong. I mean, I think to him, the Bisping fight makes sense because he looks at it on paper and he thinks, look, I can beat Bisping. But then after he beats Bisping, there could be a few rough fights for GSP.
I mean, let's just clarify. I don't think GSP ever said that he was afraid or scared, but he did say how, his style is all about timing and reflexes, and if he increases his body mass and goes up and puts on weight and goes up to middleweight, then he can never go back down to welterweight. So I'm wondering what he's thinking, because now he's talking super fights, and he doesn't want to be... He says he doesn't want the burden of, being a champion. He's not about defending belts, but you're right. Like, if he goes out and wins the middleweight title, it's like, well, you're back where you started. You're going to have that pressure of becoming a champion. Why not fight Anderson Silva? It's like, you were talking about moving up weight and things like that, but you weren't going to do it for Anderson Silva. But now all of a sudden you're in, you want to do it for Bisping. Like, I think the Anderson Silva fight makes a lot more sense because then he doesn't have that burden of being a champion. It's a nothing fight and it's a super fight at the same time. It's got nothing to do with rankings and it's perfect because neither guy is champion. It's just a good fun fight that a lot of people wanted to see. And yeah, they're not in their primes anymore, but I don't know. And if you're not Anderson Silva and if you're not going to do middleweight, then stay at welterweight. I would much rather see Robbie Lawler versus GSP at welterweight. I don't know. You could maybe do, Carlos Condit rematch or Nick Diaz rematch. But yeah, I'd rather see GSP versus Robbie Lawler. I think that's an intriguing fight that a lot of people have wanted to know. And, I mean, if GSP wins, he's back. But, Robbie Lawler, he is accepted as the champion, but he never did beat the original champion. I mean, if he can beat GSP, and I think there's a huge chance that he could, and GSP most likely will retire before Robbie Lawler would, that's a huge rub for Robbie Lawler. And you've potentially got, a much, much bigger star in Robbie Lawler, by beating GSP. So that's a fight that I would much, much rather see.
Yeah, or if he sort of takes some time to return, if Nate Diaz does beat Conor McGregor, I'd like to see Nate Diaz versus GSP, but I know he says it's his brother's fight, so maybe not that likely. Or maybe if Conor McGregor beats Nate Diaz and GSP still hasn't come back, maybe they'll go for that Conor McGregor-GSP fight. Who knows? I
will say, though, quickly, before we move on to the next question, fighting Bisping at middleweight, it may not be a terrible idea for GSP, just because... From his perspective, I think it's kind of a safe fight. If he wins, all right, he's beaten Michael Bisping. But if he loses, I don't think people would really hold it against him. Like, all right, he lost to a bigger guy. He lost to a guy that's been competing frequently. GSP's, coming off the shelf for, 2-3 years, 2.5 years, something like that. It's kind of like with Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. Like, yeah, he lost to Nate Diaz and he loses steam, but it's like, well, he lost to a guy, a couple of weight classes above him or technically one. So I think, and then GSP could still go down to welterweight and say, I'm back. I've gotten rid of the ring rust and all that stuff. But I think if he comes back and he fights Lawler instantly and he loses, and again, Lawler's not the kind of guy that you want to try and shake off ring rust against, people automatically say, Lawler's the king and this and that, which again is great for the UFC, not so great for the GSP. But anyway, enough of that. Next fan question, Scott Davenport, and this is another good one. Seeing as Stipe Miocic just knocked out Fabrizio Verdum and Cain Velasquez lost to Fabrizio without ever defending his belt, who do you think is the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time? Looking back to Mark Coleman, Randy Couture, and everyone, personally, I think considering his record and who he fought, Randy Couture is the greatest UFC heavyweight, but I think Fedor is easily the greatest MMA heavyweight fighter of all time, considering his streak and who he fought and when. But who do you think? Anyway, I'm gonna give the short version of this one. Scott Davenport basically wants to know who is the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time, and then who is the greatest of all time in general. Dennis, what do you think? And he wants to add PS Mark Hunt will be UFC heavyweight champion. I'm with you on that one, Mark. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. I mean, look, I think if you look at what's been accomplished and the career's finished, Randy Couture has definitely had a really, really impressive career. He's moved around a few different weight classes, but in a lot of ways, even though he did have a bunch of great heavyweight fights, you could almost class him as a light heavyweight more than a heavyweight. So I don't know if he would be the greatest heavyweight. If there's a Mount Rushmore of MMA faces, I definitely put Randy Couture on it, though, because of everything he's accomplished. Fedor's done a lot of great things in his prime. I mean, he was just on an unbelievable run, and even though a lot of people have sort of lost the shine on him and don't really talk about it as much, I do think he probably had one of the most impressive MMA heavyweight runs. The thing with the UFC heavyweights is if you look at records, a lot of fighters sort of didn't go for long stretches of being champion or long stretches of winning back to back. And I guess the idea is Fedor was undefeated for a really long time and fought some really, really tough competition in Pride. So I think I'd have to agree with Scott. I think he is the greatest MMA heavyweight of all time up to this point. Now, that might change in a few years depending on what happens. Obviously, Stipe is looking great. Some other stuff might go on in the heavyweight division. But I think up to this point, it's sort of hard for me to find a different fighter who's been undefeated for such a long period of time and versus the level of competition that Fedor has.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the heavyweight division is one of the most slowest evolving divisions over time. Look, I still think it's Fedor. He's no longer the best fighter today, nor is he the best heavyweight. But hey, it doesn't take away from his past accomplishments. I mean, everybody gets old, and all the greats eventually lose. Did he have some questionable opponents on his records? Yes. Did he face some less than stellar competition in his time, even during his great Pride run? Yes. But he also did fight the best at the time, and at the time, Pride had the best heavyweights, and he beat the best ones. He beat Nogueira on the ground. He stood with and beat Krokop. He beat another MMA pioneer in Marc Coleman multiple times. He beat Kevin Randleman, and some of these guys, they may not stand the test of time, and their skills may not compare to the guys of today. But at the time, they were the best, and Fedor beat them all. Even former heavyweight champions like, say, Arlovsky and Tim Sylvia, who lost their belt in the UFC, but freshly, fought Fedor soon afterwards. Both guys destroyed. During his Pride run, the one guy that he really should have faced was Randy Couture, and it's unfortunate that fight never happened. But there's also Fedor's skill set, and I think that's also part of being called the greatest of all time. You have to have influence, and you have to be sort of revolutionary. And I mean, his skill set was phenomenal in his prime. Not this headhunter version that we see today. I mean, Fedor in his prime was one of the most well-rounded fighters on the planet. He had speed, strength, power. His striking was technical. It was lethal. It was overwhelming. His ground and pound was vicious. His submissions came out of nowhere, and they came frequently. He was very, very good in the clinch because of his sambo. I mean, he had it all, and he was certainly by far the most well-rounded heavyweight at that time. You had guys who were specialists in certain disciplines. You had Krokop with great anti-wrestling, great strike. You had Nogueira who had great boxing and phenomenal jiu-jitsu. But Fedor just had it all. There was his embarrassing run in Strikeforce, and you can certainly make the case that, even then, he should have been in the UFC, in 2009, not Strikeforce, and he should have really gone there to prove himself against the best in the world, like, say, a Cain Velasquez, a Lesnar, a Mir, a Carwin at that time, and others. But even then, let's say you're in the boat that thinks Fedor just ducked tough competition and avoided the UFC. All right, you're entitled to your opinion, but then who else is the heavyweight GOAT, if not Fedor? I mean, who? I don't think it can be Nogueira because Fedor beat him, right? There's also Randy Couture. I don't think he's the greatest of all time. He's got quite a few losses on his record. I know they say, well, that's what happens when you fight tough competition, but I mean, he fought similar competition to Fedor, and I think Fedor did better than Randy against most of them. Like, say, Nogueira, who Randy lost to, Randleman, Pedro Hizzo. So I think in his time, the effect and the impact that he had on the sport, I think it's tough to deny Fedor as the greatest heavyweight of all time. I mean, people can talk about the greatest of all time in general. I don't think he can wear that label, but as far as greatest heavyweight of all time, for sure. And he may very well be surpassed. I don't know by who. If I had to put money on it, if Cain Velasquez can make a comeback and show that his injuries haven't slowed him down, maybe. I mean, if Cain Velasquez goes on to come back and like, I don't know, if he beats Travis Browne, if he beats Stipe and over him, and he avenges his loss to Verdun, maybe Velasquez. But yeah, at this point in time, I'd say it's Fedor, without a doubt.
Yeah, because I mean, the fans will be like, look, he looks terrible now, but we're not looking at his recent fights. We're looking at the stretch in his career where he was unbeaten and looked incredible, and you just can't compare that to anybody else in the heavyweight division right now. And I guess if you look at that stretch in that period of time and everyone that he's beaten, and we're talking about the greatest MMA fighter of all time, the only names that pop into my mind who could be or maybe better than him are John Jones and Demetrius Johnson. But he's still in that sort of top three position for me for greatest MMA fighters of all time as well. It's just his streak and the amount of people that he's beaten in that period of time. So when someone can have a streak that's as good as that. I mean, Chuck Liddell obviously won a bunch of fights back to back, and so did Tito Ortiz, but it wasn't the same as what Fedor did. When there's someone like that, and I think Demetrius Johnson and John Jones are at that level. I think Aldo was getting to that level, but didn't quite reach it. I think he got beaten just a little bit early. I think if he beat McGregor and beat a couple more names, I think he'd definitely be in the talk there as well. But to me, it's John Jones and Demetrius Johnson for that maybe surpass or will maybe surpass Fedor at the end of their career. But apart from that, Fedor is still in the conversation for me as one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time based on what he was able to do in Pride.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Fedor's streak, like, yeah, it was a crazy long streak, and yeah, it was sprinkled with some less than stellar fighters and some not so tough competition, but you still had good fighters in there. I don't think the quote unquote cans that Fedor beat take away from the good fighters that he beat. Maybe that streak would have been smaller if you took those fights out. It was 33 or whatever it was. No, it wasn't 33, but. Yeah, I don't think you still take away. It's not like he didn't fight Crow Cop. It's not like he didn't fight Nogueira. And yeah, you can look at those guys now and say, oh, well, they're old and their careers ended badly. Well, they were still great in their prime. That's just how most greats go out.
Well, it doesn't matter what happened at the end of their career. When it comes to talking about who the greatest is, you look at the best period of their career and also the best people that they've beaten.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get lost in that. I think a lot of people see the Fedor that fought a couple of weeks ago and they're like, well, how could this guy be the greatest fighter of all time? Well, I got newsflash for you, people. People get old. People, just because he's not the greatest now doesn't mean that he's out of the contention. You look at what they've been able to achieve. You look at what other people have been able to achieve and you compare it and then you decide who the greatest is. And, what me and Casper are saying is Fedor had an incredible run in Pride and beat a lot of really tough people. He beat a lot of bums as well, but he also beat a lot of really, really tough people. So there's no one out there apart from a John Jones or a Demetrius Johnson or maybe a couple other people who I'm forgetting who may have better careers when it's all said and done.
I think there's definitely a few people, GSP, Anderson Silva, those are definitely two that come to mind. In my opinion, it's still John Jones. I think just the greatest of all time, and obviously this is going to change every few years or every decade or every era. But just in general, I'm looking at John Jones. I mean, people talk about GSP's dominance in a very, very tough division against very, very tough guys, and the way he just shut them down and neutralized them. You could certainly make the argument that GSP is the greatest of all time. I just think that Jones did the same thing, but he made his opponents, or he also made his opponents look like amateurs, but he also did it while playing to their strengths. And that's the other thing that I just think is insane. Like, he beat them at their own games. He stood with strikers. He out-wrestled wrestlers. GSP, very smart. He usually played to his opponent's weaknesses, which is, phenomenally smart, and in no way can you knock him for that. I just find John Jones to be a lot more dangerous in a lot more positions. I mean, he was also finishing guys with their own strengths. Before he choked out Machida, he dropped him in the striking. He finished Shogun on the feet. He beat DC in the clinch. He was more than happy to strike with Glover. I mean, he's a guy that you could legitimately see going up a weight class and staying dominant and getting wins. Whether he'd be the champion or not, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't, necessarily invest in that, but I could see it. GSP, I don't know. I certainly couldn't see him beating the elite guys like Rockhold or Weidman. Jones, I have a bit of an easier time believing that, maybe he could beat a Verdun. Maybe he could beat a Stipe. I don't know. You can look at Jones's last performance against OSP, but I don't think you can really hold it against him. I mean, all the greats have at least one of those fights. GSP had the Sarah fight. Anderson had the Maya fight, and at the end of the day, look, this is really much of muchness. You can make the argument for any one of these guys, GSP, Anderson, Jones, Demetrius Johnson, Aldo. It's really, really subjective. And, out of all those guys, the person that gets deemed the GOAT is probably only going to be beating the others by fraction, on this imaginary scale. But, yeah, I truly believe that when you watch a John Jones fight, we're really witnessing greatness in the making. Which, again, you could say about the others, but yeah, I think if he goes up to heavyweight and dominates there, that'll be very telling and really solidify him as the GOAT, or at least, until somebody else comes along and surpasses it in our minds.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, one of the fighters that may join those ranks of some of the greatest of all time, and I mean, this is a number of years away from now, but there's a possibility, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she's looking fantastic as well. And if she stays dominant and up the top of the ladder in the UFC for many, many, many years, one day she may be considered one of the best fighters of all time as well. She won't be the best, but she may be in the talk for one of the best of all time. Ronda Rousey, I feel like she had a really good run, but it was just a little bit short, and I'm waiting to see what happens with the rest of her career. I think she can come back from this loss and have a bunch more dominant fights. I think she definitely you start talking about her as one of the best fighters of all time as well, but it's just been so short so far that I think it's still a little bit early to decide where she sort of falls when it comes to that. She's definitely an icon in the sport. She's definitely someone that's pushed things along. But yeah, when it comes to best fighter of all time, still not quite there.
Yeah, look, she's phenomenal as far as a female fighter, but female MMA is not on the level that male MMA, I guess, is and has been for many, many years. Like many people have already said, they're still stuck in those early UFCs where, like Robin Black said, Ronda Rousey's kind of like Royce Gracie, and everybody else is sort of still trying to figure it out. Next few fan questions, and we're going to sign off in a second. Max Alonso V. Max says, long-time listener, I gave you 5-star rating on iTunes. Hey, my guy. Also, thanks for the retweets.
Max.
Question 1, what martial arts are you currently doing? How long and how many martial art forms have you practiced? What gi brand do you support? In quotes, me, blue belt in jiu-jitsu, but I always an armchair quarterback. Dennis, go with you first.
Well, I think I kicked. When I was a kid, I did some karate, and then I did some kung fu with Casper for a bit there. Nothing really serious. It was. I don't know how much we learned, except for the fact that we had to pay him huge amounts of money and didn't really learn much.
Yeah.
And then, but quite recently, I mean, a number of years ago, I think it's been about 4 or 5 years, I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm just a white belt, and I don't really do that frequently anymore. But I do it from time to time. I did a very, very small amount of sambo with Casper. I've done some judo, and I do boxing regularly and kickboxing as well. So yeah, I guess that's my sort of background. When it comes to gis, I don't like gis. I like to do no gi, but unfortunately, most of the gyms that I go to only do gi. I don't really have a gi that I support, but see, I'm always cheap when I get my gi. I never get like a fancy gi. And I've seen some of these dudes with those nice lightweight gis. They're all beautiful and they're made out of that really nice fabric. The ones that I wear are like super heavy and they leave the worst marks on your skin. So I'm always jealous. I'm always sort of looking out of the corner of my eye. Like someone who's jealous with a good looking girlfriend, I'm just looking at their gis. Just sort of licking my lips, looking at those gis. So there you go.
Yeah, similar to Dennis, but just nowhere near their experience. I mean, I started in karate as a kid, did the kung fu. I did sambo for like a couple of years. I did, 2 years in total of BJJ. I haven't done BJJ in ages. And I've done a little bit of MMA, maybe like a year in total. So, yeah, and at the moment, I'm not training. I broke my wrist, when was it? Late last year. I was snowboarding, broke my wrist. Actually, I tweeted that up. And because we're doing the show and busy with other stuff, I took my cast off and my wrist has never healed. And I'm just an old goddamn cripple. But no, honestly, I've been hitting the gym recently. I'm back to decent form. We've got Vegas coming up in a couple of weeks, so I'm not going to commit for like a couple of weeks or a month. When I come back, I'll probably jump back to doing MMA and yeah, do that for fitness. So I'm certainly not a killing machine. I probably couldn't even hurt ants, but yeah, there you go. Gis, I've never owned a gi. I don't. Yeah, I'm the wrong person to ask as far as
you get a fancy sambo gi.
I got a sambo jacket. I like that. It's blue. Yeah. Looks gangster.
You guys had cool shorts.
Yeah.
I actually like that over a jiu-jitsu setup because there's more breathing and I like the shorts. There's more movement. I'm not a gi person.
Yeah, street ninja. Question 2, why don't you guys sell Submission Radio t-shirts? I need to represent in Southern California. Calais. Chael, the American Gangster, has a t-shirt company. Well, Chael has many things that we don't. So I think that's a very unfair comparison, Max Alonso V. Right in the feelings. He knows how to hurt us. No, look, Submission Radio t-shirts, in all seriousness, we want to get those cracking pretty soon. We just need to find a good way to do it. We want to do it properly.
Yeah.
We don't want to have these cheap piece of shit shirts that you're buying and they fall apart and there's moths coming out of the bags, and we want to get some cool designs. So it is all in the works, but with Vegas coming up, there were just other things that took precedent.
Yeah, and Max, we appreciate the tweets. I think he tweeted once and tagged Chael in there. I don't know if Chael wants any Submission Radio t-shirts, but look, we'll keep looking at ways. And if you guys have any good ideas of the best way for us to get these t-shirts together, definitely drop us a comment or shoot us an email. We're looking at the most logistically best way to give you guys the best Submission Radio t-shirts, so that when you're in Cali, the girls like you because you got a nice cut t-shirt, not one of those t-shirts that go up to your neck and look like a turtleneck and the print's coming off the back. like one of those cheap tour T-shirts you get from a really bad concert. So we want softness, much like with our underwear discussion. You know, I love nothing more than a nice, soft, new T-shirt that makes me look slimmer than I really am. So we'll be figuring out ways to do that. We'll be like Reebok. We'll be like when Everlast was trying to create gloves for Bellator that don't create eye pokes. We'll be, you know, we're testing things. It's like that sports program, Sports Lab or whatever here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned logistics. That's the thing. We've got to be smart about it because we live in Australia and shipping is ridiculous. So we don't want you guys paying, you know, an arm and a leg. We want to sell T-shirts and, I mean, not really to look at it from a money-making thing just because so many people have asked for it, but we don't want you paying, you know, like $60 for a T-shirt. We want it to be nice and cheap and affordable. So anybody around the world, whether you're in Cali or Kazakhstan, whatever, you can, if you want to, wear a Submission Radio T-shirt. But it melts our hearts every time we hear that people want to wear some kind of apparel or something with a Submission Radio logo. So really appreciate it. Question 3, I love the and this is like the second last question. Question 3, I love the roundtable or panel discussions on fights or fighter analysis, but try getting analysts or people who don't agree. Remember the old CNN crossfire, get some more professional arguments, just don't get drama. I'll sort of kick this one off. That's a good one, but we don't really know who's going to argue and who's not going to argue kind of thing. Like, we don't really know people's thoughts. Before we do these roundtables, we kind of like to keep it secret like gorillas in the mist. We don't really, you know, I think sometimes people know what we're going to discuss because there's big things happening in MMA, but usually it's pretty spontaneous. So it's not like we know what people's opinions are. And I don't know, man, like, the people that we get on, they're all pretty level-headed. I don't think we get anyone on that's like, you know, super crazy or gonna start arguments. I know like one time we had a panel with like Dwayne Finley and like he had some really good different opinions and it just worked really nice. But the other thing is like it's tough when you have two guests and then you got you got myself and Dennis. I'm Casper. Because then I feel like everybody's opinions get cut a little bit short. Like we did this one breakdown with Dave Meltzer, Tommy Toehold, you, Dennis, and myself, and it's like everybody gets like a few seconds in, and it kind of becomes a little bit watered down. So we kind of try and keep the, you know, guests for panels and roundtables sort of to a minimum so that everybody can get, you know, their words in.
Yeah, and sometimes what we sort of started doing now is if we do get a guy on to talk about his opinion after, and we don't have an opportunity to really put our opinion in there because we don't have much time or, you know, they're on a move, what we'll do now is some of the time afterwards we'll let you guys know what our opinion is. So that's something that we've been enjoying. But yeah, definitely, if you want some crossfire, I don't know, maybe we can get Donald Trump on the show. We can talk to him about a few things. I'm sure we'll disagree on about a bunch of them.
Yeah, I don't know how many, like, I understand the theory, like, yep, disagreeing is more interesting, and, like, I've had some interesting conversations with, like, you know, a lot of fans. I used to work with this guy at my old job who would just always disagree on anything, and it led to really great discussions, so I get where you're coming from, but I don't know, I think, like, a lot of people, when they come on the show, they kind of feel like they have to be polite and nice and things like that. I don't know how many arguments you're going to see. If you're expecting something like, you know, The Dark Knight where the Joker, like, cracks that pool cue and throws it on the ground, it's like, we've got auditions, and the two guys have to fight over who's going to be on the Joker squad. Like, I don't think anything like that's going to happen. Not on this show. Maybe Submission Radio up late.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, unfiltered. But if there's an opinion that we disagree with or a thought that we have, we'll definitely share it with you guys. We won't hold back.
Last question, Mr. Omar, who would win between a fight between Casper and Dennis? I'm just gonna say Dennis would win a fight. If Dennis and me fought, I mean, like you heard, he's vastly more experienced. I mean, you know, he does boxing sparring regularly, and I don't. He's better at BJJ. If I can have nightmares about your north and south and your shorts that didn't get washed in 2 months. I'm just kidding. 3 months. So yeah, I'd say I can confidently say I think Dennis would win. But I'm like George Costanza. I fight dirty.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, you've got the broken wrist. I've injured my left bicep, and then because I injured my left bicep, and we had this Vegas trip coming up, I focused on just doing squats and all these crazy type of Tabata workouts, and then I injured my patella tendon in my right leg. So I'm pretty much useless as well. It would be like, I don't know, it would be like seeing two sloths slowly roll towards each other. It would not be fun to watch.
Yeah, exactly. One day we'll juke it out, but it'll be like Rocky and Apollo Creed. It'll be behind closed doors and nobody will ever see. And by that I mean we'll film it and put it on the channel. 6,000 thumbs down. Anyway, that's it. This is the real wrap up. I mean, we got to remind you a few things. Obviously, this is going to be the last show for a while, for a few weeks, maybe like a month, because there's no show next week. Then we've got Vegas for like a couple of weeks. And then there's some, after International Fight Week, there's going to be a couple of other things that we'll be tending to in Vegas. So it's going to be, and in the US in general. So we're going to be overseas for about a month, and doing that, you can't be organizing interviews and doing the show. So we'll be back in about a month, but man, there's going to be a ridiculous amount of content on the channel in that time. Not only UFC 200, the fight night, the TUF finale, International Fight Week, Hall of Fame ceremony, there is going to be a gigantic amount of content on the channel, isn't there, Dennis?
Yeah, there is. Look, well, there's been some situations where we've sort of said, hey, guys, check out the channel. We're going to Brisbane. Or, hey, guys, check out the channel. We're going to Adelaide. We're going to Sydney. Subscribe to the channel. Or even in Melbourne, we said, make sure you subscribe to the channel. There was a lot of great content. With this one, I mean, it makes UFC 193 in Melbourne look like a fight night. There is so much stuff coming up. There are so many press conferences, so many things that we're going to be a part of, and then all the additional stuff on top of it. And also, we're going to have these vlogs, these vlogs, letting you guys know exactly what we're doing. So in a lot of ways, even though we'll be gone for a month, we're still going to be connected to you guys in a lot of ways. Obviously, you'll be able to see exactly what we get up to with these vlogs and all these different videos. We'll be sharing our experiences and all the fun stuff that we're doing in Vegas. We'll be trying to hit up some different interviews as well. And there's going to be a lot of stuff, traditional coverage, stuff outside of that. This is definitely the time. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, if you're listening to TuneIn or iTunes or Stitcher or something like that, and you haven't really checked out the channel, jump on there, because obviously this stuff won't be on TuneIn or any of these other devices. Jump on there and check out some of the fun stuff that we've got coming up. We just can't wait to show off some of the fun stuff that we've got. Casper, I know that you got a neat little purchase, something new, something to help us with this. A new camera to capture some of these moments.
Yeah, we're rolling up there with like 1 million cameras, tripods, and all this shit. But yeah, I got a brand new camera just purely for vlogging. This is just a personal one, and our videographer will sort of put things together. So that's exciting. I'm gonna be pretty much documenting the whole trip, and they're gonna have these quick little videos that, I mean, it's probably not gonna be a daily thing. I can pretty much guarantee you that, but when we get to Vegas, we'll probably have one about our first few days, and then hopefully, every sort of day after that, each fight night and whatnot, we'll have a new vlog, sort of showing you guys what it is like, backstage, and yeah, I guess documenting our whole adventure. If we do anything else fun, then hopefully we can capture that. So there's going to be a ridiculous amount of content. We can't wait to come back with the show, back to the original, standard format that you guys are used to. As we're wrapping up, a massive thank you to you guys for listening, and of course a massive thank you to our guests, Johny Hendricks, Jim Ross, Chael Sonnen, Marc Raimondi, Campbell McLaren, and of course Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Don't forget, follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. Hit us up if you're in Vegas. I can't guarantee that we're going to hang out and chug some beers, because it's going to be ridiculously busy. But hey, feel free to hit us up, and if we're near a bar near you, then I don't see why not. Till then, guys, stay safe, and we'll chat to you soon.